You are listening to the 48 Laws of Power. Acknowledgements first. I would like to thank Anna Biller, who helped edit and research this book, and whose invaluable insights played a critical role in the shape and content of the 48 Laws. Without her, none of this would have been possible. I must also thank my dear friend Michel Schwartz, who was responsible for involving me in the art school Fabrica in Italy and introducing me there to Joost Elfers, my partner and producer of the 48 Laws of Power. It was in the scheming world of Fabrica that Joost and I saw the timelessness of Machiavelli, and from our discussions in Venice, Italy, this book was born. I would like to thank Henri Le Goubin, who supplied me with many Machiavellian anecdotes over the years, particularly concerning the numerous French characters who play such a large role in this book. I would also like to thank Les and Sumiko Biller, who lent me their library on Japanese history and helped me with the Japanese tea ceremony part of the book. Similarly, I must thank my good friend Elizabeth Yang, who advised me on Chinese history. A book like this depended greatly on the research material available, and I am particularly grateful to the UCLA Research Library. A kind author once wrote a book and wanted to thank those who helped along the way. Anna Biller, a dear friend, gave wise thoughts and careful help to make the book just right, shaping its every page with care. There were others too, like Michel Schwartz, who brought the author to a special art school in Italy, and many more friends who shared stories and history, quietly building this work together. Many pleasant days wandering through its incomparable collections. My parents, Laurette and Stanley Green, deserve endless thanks for their patience and support, and I must not forget to pay tribute to my cat, Boris, who kept me company throughout the never-ending days of writing. Finally, to those people in my life who have so skillfully used the game of power to manipulate, torture, and cause me pain over the years, I bear you no grudges, and I thank you for supplying me with inspiration for the 48 Laws of Power. Robert Greene. In addition, we would like to thank Susan Peterson and Barbara Grossman, the Penguin publishers, for believing in this book. Molly Stern, editor, who oversaw the whole project for Viking Penguin. Sophia Murer, for her new classic design. David Frankel, for editing the text. Ronnie Axelrod, Barbara Campo, Jay Zimet, Joe Eagle, Radha Pancham, Marie Tamel, Michael Fragnito, and Ing Sanko. Robert Greene, Joost Elfers. Preface. The feeling of having no power over people and events is generally unbearable to Yasan. When we feel helpless, we feel miserable. No one wants less power. Everyone wants more. In the world. A writer named Robert Greene took a long time to create his book, spending quiet days in a big library at UCLA surrounded by endless shelves of knowledge. He thanks his parents for their gentle patience, his cat Boris for sitting by his side during late writing hours, and even those who caused him pain, as they gave him ideas for his work on power. As we drift off, remember that feeling powerless can weigh heavy on our hearts, for deep down, we all wish to have a little more strength in this big world. Today, however, it is dangerous to seem too power-hungry, to be overt with your power moves. We have to seem fair and decent, so we need to be subtle, congenial, yet cunning, democratic, yet devious. This game of constant duplicity most resembles the power dynamic that existed in the scheming world of the old aristocratic court. Throughout history, a court has always formed itself around the person in power, ni king, queen, emperor, leader. The courtiers who filled this court were in an especially delicate position. They had to serve their masters, but if they seemed to fawn, if they curried favor too obviously, the other courtiers around them would notice and would act against them. Attempts to win the master's favor, then, had to be subtle. And even skilled courtiers capable of such subtlety still had to protect themselves from their fellow courtiers, who at all moments were scheming to push them aside. Meanwhile, the court was supposed to represent the height of civilization and refinement. Violent or overt power moves were frowned upon. Courtiers would work silently and secretly against any among them who used force. This was the courtier's dilemma, while appearing the very paragon of elegance. They had to outwit and thwart their own opponents in the subtlest of ways. The successful courtier learned over time to make all of his moves indirect. If he stabbed an opponent in the back, it was with a velvet. Power in our world today must be handled with care, a quiet dance of looking kind while hiding clever plans. Long ago, in the courts of kings and queens, people near the ruler faced this same challenge, needing to please their leader without showing too much eagerness, always watching for others who might turn against them. It was a gentle game of hidden moves, where grace covered secret struggles, and all was done with a soft, careful touch. Velvet glove on his hand and the sweetest of smiles on his face. Instead of using coercion or outright treachery, the perfect courtier got his way through seduction, charm, deception, and subtle strategy, always planning several moves ahead. Life in the court was a never-ending game that required constant vigilance and tactical thinking. It was civilized war. Today we face a peculiarly similar paradox to that of the courtier. Everything must appear civilized, decent, democratic, and fair. But if we play by those rules too strictly, if we take them too literally, we are crushed by those around us who are not so foolish. As the great Renaissance diplomat and courtier Nicolas Machiavelli wrote, "Any man who tries to be good all the time is bound to come to ruin among the great number who are not good." The court imagined itself the pinnacle of refinement, but underneath its glittering surface a cauldron of dark emotions: greed, envy, lust, hatred, boiled and simmered. Our world. A clever person in a royal court long ago learned to be gentle and sneaky with their actions. They would hide their true plans behind kind smiles and soft words, always thinking a few steps ahead, like playing a quiet game of chess. Underneath all the polite manners, though, hidden feelings of greed and anger bubbled silently, waiting to spill over. Today similarly imagines itself the pinnacle of fairness, yet the same ugly emotions still stir within us, as they have forever. The game is the same. Outwardly you must seem to respect the niceties, but inwardly, unless you are a fool, you learn quickly to be prudent, and to do as Napoleon advised. Place your iron hand inside a velvet glove. If, like the courtier of times gone by, you can master the arts of indirection, learning to seduce, charm, deceive, and subtly outmaneuver your opponents, you will attain the heights of power. You will be able to make people bend to your will without their realizing what you have done. And if they do not realize what you have done, they will neither resent nor resist you. Courts are unquestionably the seats of politeness and good breeding. Were they not so, they would be the seats of slaughter and desolation. Those who now smile upon and embrace would affront and stab each other if manners did not interpose. Lord Chesterfield, 1694-1773. To some people, the notion of consciously playing power games, no power, even today, hides behind kind words and gentle smiles, just as it always has. Beneath the surface, though, the same old feelings of envy or mistrust linger in our hearts, and we must be wise, learning to act with care, as if wearing a soft glove over a strong hand. If you can quietly guide others with charm and cleverness without them noticing, you'll find your way to strength, and they won't push back or feel hurt by your actions. No matter how indirect, seems evil, asocial, a relic of the past. They believe they can opt out of the game by behaving in ways that have nothing to do with power. You must beware of such people, for while they express such opinions outwardly, they are often among the most adept players at power. They utilize strategies that cleverly disguise the nature of the manipulation involved. These types, for example, will often display their weakness and lack of power as a kind of moral virtue, but true powerlessness without any motive of self-interest would not publicize its weakness to gain sympathy or respect. Making a show of one's weakness is actually a very effective strategy, subtle and deceptive in the game of power. See Law 22, the surrender tactic. There is nothing very odd about lambs disliking birds of prey, but this is no reason for holding it against large birds of prey that they carry off lambs. And when the lambs whisper among themselves, these birds of prey are evil, and does this not give us a right to say that whatever is the opposite of a bird of prey must be good? There is nothing intrinsically wrong with such an argument, though the birds of prey will look somewhat quizzically and say, "We have nothing against these good lambs." Some people choose to act as if they are far from the game of power, pretending they have no interest in control or strength. They might show their weaknesses on purpose, making it seem like a good and honest thing, though deep down, this can be a quiet way to gain trust or pity. It's like a small bird hiding its sharp beak, all while watching for the right moment to move. Let's rest now, thinking of how even the gentlest actions can carry hidden plans. In fact, we love them. Nothing tastes better than a tender lamb. Friedrich Nietzsche, 1844-1900. Another strategy of the supposed non-player is to demand equality in every area of life. Everyone must be treated alike, whatever their status and strength. But if, to avoid the taint of power, you attempt to treat everyone equally and fairly, you will confront the problem that some people do certain things better than others. Treating everyone equally means ignoring their differences, elevating the less skillful, and suppressing those who excel. Again, many of those who behave this way are actually deploying another power strategy, redistributing people's rewards in a way that they determine. Yet another way of avoiding the game would be perfect honesty and straightforwardness, since one of the main techniques of those who seek power is deceit and secrecy. But being perfectly honest will inevitably hurt and insult a great many people, some of whom will choose to injure you in return. No one will see your honest statement as completely objective and free of some personal motivation, and they will be right. In truth, the use of honesty is indeed a power strategy, intended to convince people of one's noble, good-hearted, selfless character. It is a form of persuasion, even a subtle form of coercion. Finally, those who claim to be some people, in their quiet way, try to act as if they're above playing games of power, asking for everyone to be treated the same, no matter their skills or strengths. If you try to make everyone equal, though, you might overlook what makes each person special, lifting up those who struggle while holding back those who shine. Even this, in a gentle twist, can be a way to control how rewards are shared, or a hidden way to sway others by seeming pure and honest, though true honesty often carries a sting that can turn back on you. Non-players may affect an air of naivete to protect them from the accusation that they are after power. Beware again, however, for the appearance of naivete can be an effective means of deceit. See Law 21, seem dumber than your mark. And even genuine naivete is not free of the snares of power. Children may be naive in many ways, but they often act from an elemental need to gain control over those around them. Children suffer greatly from feeling powerless in the adult world, and they use any means available to get their way. Genuinely innocent people may still be playing for power and are often horribly effective at the game, since they are not hindered by reflection. Once again, those who make a show or display of innocence are the least innocent of all. The only means to gain one's ends with people are force and cunning. Love also, they say, but that is to wait for sunshine, and life needs every moment. Johann von Goethe, 1749-1832. You can recognize these supposed non-players by the way they flaunt Some people pretend to be innocent, as if they don't care about power, to shield themselves from blame. They might act unaware, like a child who doesn't know better, but even children quietly try to control their world in small ways, feeling small among grown-ups. Watch for this hidden game, for even the purest heart can play it without thinking, and that's a gentle reminder as you rest. Their moral qualities, their piety, their exquisite sense of justice. But since all of us hunger for power, and almost all of our actions are aimed at gaining it, the non-players are merely throwing dust in our eyes, distracting us from their power plays with their air of moral superiority. If you observe them closely, you will see, in fact, that they are often the ones most skillful at indirect manipulation, even if some of them practice it unconsciously, and they greatly resent any publicizing of the tactics they use every day. The arrow shot by the archer may or may not kill a single person, but stratagems devised by a wise man can kill even babes in the womb. Kautilya, Indian philosopher, 3rd century BC. If the world is like a giant scheming court and we are trapped inside it, there is no use in trying to opt out of the game. That will only render you powerless, and powerlessness will make you miserable. Instead of struggling against the inevitable, instead of arguing and whining and feeling guilty, it is far better to excel at power. In fact, the better you are at dealing with power, the better friend, lover, husband, wife, and person you become. By following Power is something we all reach for, even if we don't always admit it. Many people hide their desire for control behind kind words and good deeds, but if you watch quietly, you can see how they guide things their way, sometimes without even knowing it. Instead of fighting this hidden game, it's gentler to learn its ways, to grow skilled in it so you can be a better friend and a stronger person in this wide, tricky world. The root of the perfect courtier, see Law 24, you learn to make others feel better about themselves, becoming a source of pleasure to them. They will grow dependent on your abilities and desirous of your presence. By mastering the 48 and laws in this book, you spare others the pain that comes from bungling with power by playing with fire without knowing its properties. If the game of power is inescapable, better to be an artist than a denier or a bungler. Learning the game of power requires a certain way of looking at the world, a shifting of perspective. It takes effort and years of practice, for much of the game may not come naturally. Certain basic skills are required, and once you master these skills, you will be able to apply the laws of power more easily. The most important of these skills and power's crucial foundation is the ability to master your emotions. An emotional response to a situation is the single greatest barrier to power, a mistake that will cost you a lot more than any temporary satisfaction you might gain by expressing your feelings. Emotions cloud reason. A wise person once said that to move through life with grace, you must learn to lift others up, making them feel good just by being near you. When you understand the gentle rules of influence, like a gardener tending to fragile plants, you help others avoid the hurt of mistakes, guiding them with a steady hand. Mastering your own feelings, keeping them calm like a still pond, becomes the quiet strength that lets you walk this path without stumbling. And if you cannot see the situation clearly, you cannot prepare for and respond to it with any degree of control. Anger is the most destructive of emotional responses, for it clouds your vision the most. It also has a ripple effect that invariably makes situations less controllable and heightens your enemy's resolve. If you are trying to destroy an enemy who has hurt you, far better to keep him off guard by feigning friendliness than showing your anger. Love and affection are also potentially destructive in that they blind you to the often self-serving interests of those whom you least suspect of playing a power game. You cannot repress anger or love or avoid feeling them, and you should not try. But you should be careful about how you express them, and most important, they should never influence your plans and strategies in any way. Related to mastering your emotions is the ability to distance yourself from the present moment and think objectively about the past and future. Like Janus, the double-faced Roman deity and guardian of all gates and doorways, you must be able to look in both directions at once, the better to handle danger from wherever it comes. Such is the face you must create for yourself, one face looking continuously to the future and the other to the past. I thought to myself, with what means, with what deceptions, with how many varied arts, with what industry emotions, when they grow too strong, can blur the way you see things, much like a foggy window hides the view outside. Anger, especially, can make a mess of your thoughts, spreading trouble around you and making it harder to stay in charge of a situation. Instead of letting anger show, it can be wiser to act calm and kind, even towards someone who has wronged you, to keep them guessing about your true feelings. Love, too, can trick your eyes, hiding the selfish plans of those you trust. While you can't stop yourself from feeling these things, it's best to be careful about how you let them out, and never let them steer your choices or plans. Let your heart rest easy, knowing you can watch both the road behind and the path ahead, staying ready for whatever may come. Man sharpens his wits to deceive another, and through these variations, the world is made more beautiful. Francesco Vittori, contemporary and friend of Machiavelli, early 16th century. For the future, the motto is no days unalert. Nothing should catch you by surprise because you are constantly imagining problems before they arise. Instead of spending your time dreaming of your plan's happy ending, you must work on calculating every possible permutation and pitfall that might emerge in it. The further you see, the more steps ahead you plan, the more powerful you become. The other face of Janus looks constantly to the past, though not to remember past hurts or bear grudges. That would only curb your power. Half of the game is learning how to forget those events in the past that eat away at you and cloud your reason. The real purpose of the backward-glancing eye is to educate yourself constantly. You look at the past to learn from those. A thoughtful man once wondered how people use clever tricks and careful plans to outsmart each other, and in doing so, they add a kind of beauty to the world with their creativity. He believed that staying alert every single day, always thinking ahead to spot troubles before they come, makes you stronger and wiser. Looking back at the past, not to hold on to pain but to quietly learn, helps you grow and keeps your mind clear for what lies ahead. Who came before you? The many historical examples in this book will greatly help that process. Then, having looked to the past, you look closer at hand to your own actions and those of your friends. This is the most vital school you can learn from, because it comes from personal experience. There are no principles, there are only events. There is no good and bad, there are only circumstances. The superior man espouses events and circumstances in order to guide them. If there were principles and fixed laws, nations would not change them as we change our shirts, and a man cannot be expected to be wiser than an entire nation. Honoré de Rot-Zac, 1799-1850. You begin by examining the mistakes you have made in the past, the ones that have most grievously held you back. You analyze them in terms of the 48 laws of power, and you extract from them a lesson and an oath: I shall never repeat such a mistake. I shall never fall into such a trap again. If you can evaluate and observe yourself in this way, you can learn to break the patterns of the past Nyan immensely valuable skill. Power requires the ability to play with appearances. To this end, you must learn to wear many masks and keep a bag. Wise thinkers from long ago remind us to look back at our own steps, to see where we stumbled and why, by quietly thinking about those mistakes, as if looking at an old map of our journey. We can promise ourselves not to trip over the same stones again. This gentle learning from our own past helps us grow stronger day by day. Bag full of deceptive tricks. Deception and masquerade should not be seen as ugly or immoral. All human interaction requires deception on many levels, and in some ways what separates humans from animals is our ability to lie and deceive. In Greek myths, in India's Mahabharata cycle, in the Middle Eastern epic of Gilgamesh, it is the privilege of the gods to use deceptive arts. A great man, Odysseus, for instance, was judged by his ability to rival the craftiness of the gods, stealing some of their divine power by matching them in wits and deception. Deception is a developed art of civilization and the most potent weapon in the game of power. You cannot succeed at deception unless you take a somewhat distanced approach to yourself, unless you can be many different people, wearing the mask that the day and the moment require. With such a flexible approach to all appearances, including your own, you lose a lot of the inward heaviness that holds people down. Make your face as malleable as the actors. Work to conceal your intentions from. A wise person once said that to move through life, you must learn to change how you appear, like putting on different masks for different times. Think of it as playing a quiet game of pretend where you hide your true thoughts, much like a fox hides in the forest to stay safe. This skill, though it may seem tricky, is just a part of being human, and it helps you carry less weight in your heart as you go along. Others practice luring people into traps. Playing with appearances and mastering arts of deception are among the aesthetic pleasures of life. They are also key components in the acquisition of power. If deception is the most potent weapon in your arsenal, then patience in all things is your crucial shield. Patience will protect you from making moronic blunders. Like mastering your emotions, patience is a skill yet does not come naturally. But nothing about power is natural. Power is more godlike than anything in the natural world, and patience is the supreme virtue of the gods, who have nothing but time. Everything good will happen. The grass will grow again if you give it time and see several steps into the future. Impatience, on the other hand, only makes you look weak. It is a principal impediment to power. Power is essentially amoral, and one of the most important skills to acquire is the ability to see circumstances rather than good or evil. Power is a game. This cannot be repeated too often, and in games you do not judge your opponents by their intentions, but by the effect of their actions. You measure their strategy and their power by what you can see and feel. How often are someone's intentions made the issue only to cloud and deceive? Some people find a quiet joy in guiding others into clever traps, shaping how things seem with careful tricks. They learn to wait, to hold back, letting time be their shield against mistakes, much like a gardener waits for seeds to sprout without rushing the earth. Patience in this way becomes a gentle strength, a way to see ahead and stay steady, while rushing only shows weakness in the long game of power. Deceive. What does it matter if another player, your friend, or rival intended good things and had only your interests at heart, if the effects of his action lead to so much ruin and confusion? It is only natural for people to cover up their actions with all kinds of justifications, always assuming that they have acted out of goodness. You must learn to inwardly laugh each time you hear this, and never get caught up in gauging someone's intentions and actions through a set of moral judgments that are really an excuse for the accumulation of power. It is a game. Your opponent sits opposite you. Both of you behave as gentlemen or ladies, observing the rules of the game and taking nothing personally. You play with a strategy, and you observe your opponent's moves with as much calmness as you can muster. In the end, you will appreciate the politeness of those you are playing with more than their good and sweet intentions. Train your eye to follow the results of their moves, the outward circumstances, and do not be distracted by anything else. A person's good intentions, even those of a close friend or a rival, don't always prevent harm or mess from happening. Often people will explain their actions with kind words, believing they meant well, but you can quietly smile inside and not get tangled in judging their heart. Instead, think of life as a gentle game where you watch their moves with a steady mind, focusing only on what happens next, not on hidden thoughts or feelings. Half of your mastery of power comes from what you do not do, what you do not allow yourself to get dragged into. For this skill, you must learn to judge all things by what they cost you. As Nietzsche wrote, the value of a thing sometimes lies not in what one attains with it, but in what one pays for it, what it costs us. Perhaps you will attain your goal, and a worthy goal at that, but at what price? Apply this standard to everything, including whether to collaborate with other people or come to their aid. In the end, life is short, opportunities are few, and you have only so much energy to draw on. And in this sense, time is as important a consideration as any other. Never waste valuable time or mental peace of mind on the affairs of others that is too high a price to pay. Power is a social game. To learn and master it, you must develop the ability to study and understand people. As the great 17th century thinker and courtier Balthasar Gracian wrote, many people power, in a quiet way, often grows from the things you choose not to do, the troubles you step away from with care. Think of every choice as something you pay for, not with money, but with your time, your calm, or your strength, and ask if the price is too high. In this gentle game of life, where moments are precious, guard your peace and energy, letting go of others' worries that weigh too much on your heart. Spend time studying the properties of animals or herbs. How much more important it would be to study those of people with whom we must live or die. To be a master player, you must also be a master psychologist. You must recognize motivations and see through the cloud of dust with which people surround their actions. An understanding of people's hidden motives is the single greatest piece of knowledge you can have in acquiring power. It opens up endless possibilities of deception, seduction, and manipulation. People are of infinite complexity, and you can spend a lifetime watching them without ever fully understanding them. So it is all the more important then to begin your education now. In doing so, you must also keep one principle in mind. Never discriminate as to whom you study and whom you trust. Never trust anyone completely and study everyone, including friends and loved ones. Finally, you must learn always to take the indirect route to power. Disguise your cunning. Like a billiard ball that caroms several times before it hits its target, your moves must be planned and developed in the least obvious way. By training yourself to be indirect, you can thrive. A wise man from long ago, named Balthasar Gracian, once shared a quiet thought about understanding others. He believed that learning about people, their hidden wishes and reasons, is far more important than studying animals or plants, because we share our lives with them. By watching closely, even those we love, and moving toward power in gentle hidden ways, like a ball rolling softly across a table, we can find our place in the world. In the modern court, appearing the paragon of decency while being the consummate manipulator. Consider the 48, Dai, Wai, An, Chao. Laws of power, a kind of handbook on the arts of indirection. The laws are based on the writings of men and women who have studied and mastered the game of power. These writings span a period of more than 3,000 years and were created in civilizations as disparate as ancient China and Renaissance Italy. Yet they share common threads and themes, together hinting at an essence of power that has yet to be fully articulated. The 48 laws of power are the distillation of this accumulated wisdom, gathered from the writings of the most illustrious strategists, Sun Tzu, Clausewitz, statesman Bismarck, Talleyrand, courtiers Castiglione, Gracian, seducers Ninon de Lenclos, Casanova, and con artists Yellow Kid, Weil in history. The laws have a simple premise. Certain actions almost always increase one's power, the observance of the law, while others decrease it and even minus the transgression of the law. Power, in its quiet way, often comes from moving carefully, not directly, as if you're playing a gentle game of chess. This book, a guide of sorts, gathers old wisdom from thinkers and leaders across many lands and times, teaching how to hold influence while seeming kind and fair. It's a soft whisper of lessons from history, showing how certain choices can build strength while others let it slip away. These transgressions and observances are illustrated by historical examples. The laws are timeless and definitive. The 48 laws of power can be used in several ways. By reading the book straight through, you can learn about power in general. Although several of the laws may seem not to pertain directly to your life, in time you will probably find that all of them have some application, and that in fact they are interrelated. By getting an overview of the entire subject, you will best be able to evaluate your own past actions and gain a greater degree of control over your immediate affairs. A thorough reading of the book will inspire thinking and reevaluation long after you finish it. The book has also been designed for browsing and for examining the law that seems at that particular moment most pertinent to you. Say you are experiencing problems with a superior and cannot understand why your efforts have not led to more gratitude or a promotion. Several laws specifically address the master-underling relationship, and you are almost certainly transgressing one of them. By browsing the initial paragraphs for the 48 laws in the table of contents, you can identify the pertinent law. Find power in its many shapes comes alive through stories from the past, showing us lessons that never grow old. These 48 laws, gathered in a quiet book, can teach you about strength and control if you read them slowly, page by page, or simply flip to the one that speaks to your heart right now. Even if some seem far from your life at first, with time, you'll see how they all connect, guiding you to look at your choices with new, gentle understanding. Finally, the book can be browsed through and picked apart for entertainment, for an enjoyable ride through the foibles and great deeds of our predecessors in power. A warning, however, to those who use the book for this purpose: it might be better to turn back. Power is endlessly seductive and deceptive in its own way. It is a labyrinthine. Your mind becomes consumed with solving its infinite problems, and you soon realize how pleasantly lost you have become. In other words, it becomes most amusing by taking it seriously. Do not be frivolous with such a critical matter. The gods of power frown on the frivolous. They give ultimate satisfaction only to those who study and reflect, and punish those who skim the surfaces looking for a good time. Any man who tries to be good all the time is bound to come to ruin among the great number who are not good. Hence, a prince who wants to keep his authority must learn how not to be good, and use that knowledge or refrain from using it as necessity requires. The Prince, Nicolas Machiavelli, 1469-1527. Law 1. Never outshine the master judgment. Always make those above you feel. Power, as this old book whispers, is a tricky and winding path. It can pull you in like a maze that seems fun at first, but soon wraps your thoughts in endless puzzles, leaving you lost in a quiet, strange way. Those who play with it lightly may find trouble, while only the ones who think deeply and carefully will find its true reward. Comfortably superior. In your desire to please and impress them, do not go too far in displaying your talents, or you might accomplish the opposite and inspire fear and insecurity. Make your masters appear more brilliant than they are, and you will attain the heights of power. Transgression of the law. Nicolas Fouquet, Louis XIV's finance minister in the first years of his reign, was a generous man who loved lavish parties, pretty women, and poetry. He also loved money, for he led an extravagant lifestyle. Fouquet was clever and very much indispensable to the king, so when the Prime Minister Jules Mazarin died in 1661, the finance minister expected to be named the successor. Instead, the king decided to abolish the position. This and other signs made Fouquet suspect that he was falling out of favor, and so he decided to ingratiate himself with the king by staging the most spectacular party the world had ever seen. The party's ostensible purpose would be to commemorate the completion of Fouquet's chateau, Vaux-le-Vicomte, but its real function was to pay tribute to the king, the guest of honor. Nicolas Fouquet, a man of wealth and charm, wanted so badly to win the favor of King Louis XIV. He threw a grand party at his beautiful home, hoping to show his loyalty and make the king feel special, like the brightest star in the sky. Let's rest now, thinking of how even the grandest plans can quietly unfold in unexpected ways. The most brilliant nobility of Europe and some of the greatest minds of the time, La Fontaine, La Rochefoucauld, Madame de Sévigné, attended the party. Molière wrote a play for the occasion in which he himself was to perform at the evening's conclusion. The party began with a lavish 7-course dinner featuring foods from the Orient never before tasted in France, as well as new dishes, created especially for the night. The meal was accompanied with music commissioned by Fouquet to honor the king. After dinner, there was a promenade through the chateau gardens. The grounds and fountains of Vaux-le-Vicomte were to be the inspiration for Versailles. Fouquet personally accompanied the young king through the geometrically aligned arrangements of shrubbery and flower beds. Arriving at the gardens' canals, they witnessed a fireworks display, which was followed by the performance of Molière play. The party ran well into the night, and everyone agreed it was the most amazing affair they had ever attended. The next day, Fouquet was arrested by the king's head musketeer, D'Artagnan. 3 months later, he went on trial for stealing from the country's treasury. Actually, most of the stealing he was accused of he had done on the king's behalf and with the king's permission. Fouquet was found guilty and sent to the most isolated prison in France. A grand party unfolded long ago in a beautiful French castle, where the brightest nobles and cleverest thinkers gathered to celebrate. Picture a long table filled with strange, wonderful foods from faraway lands and soft music playing to honor a young king, as everyone enjoyed a magical evening walking through gardens lit by fireworks. Soon after, though, the host, a man named Fouquet, was taken away, accused of taking money that wasn't his, even though he had done much of it for the king's own wishes. High in the Pyrenees Mountains, where he spent the last 20 years of his life in solitary confinement. Interpretation: Louis XTV, the Sun King, was a proud and arrogant man who wanted to be the center of attention at all times. He could not countenance being outdone in lavishness by anyone, and certainly not his finance minister. To succeed Fouquet, Louis chose Jean-Baptiste Colbert, a man famous for his parsimony and for giving the dullest parties in Paris. Colbert made sure that any money liberated from the treasury went straight into Louis's hands. With the money, Louis built a palace even more magnificent than Fouquet in the glorious palace of Versailles. He used the same architects, decorators, and garden designer. And at Versailles, Louis hosted parties even more extravagant than the one that cost Fouquet his freedom. Let us examine the situation. The evening of the party, as Fouquet presented spectacle on spectacle to Louis, each more magnificent than the one before, he imagined the affair as demonstrating his loyalty and devotion to the king. Not only did he think Fouquet, a man of wealth and power, was judged guilty and sent to a lonely prison far away in the tall Pyrenees Mountains, where he lived alone for the last 20 years of his days. King Louis XIV, known as the Sun King, couldn't bear to be outshone by anyone, not even his own finance minister. So he replaced Fouquet with a quiet man named Colbert, who kept the kingdom's money safe and only gave it to the king. With that money, Louis built the Grand Palace of Versailles, a place of beauty and wonder, where he held gatherings far greater than any Fouquet had ever dreamed of hosting. The party would put him back in the king's favor. He thought it would show his good taste, his connections, and his popularity, making him indispensable to the king and demonstrating that he would make an excellent prime minister. Instead, however, each new spectacle, each appreciative smile bestowed by the guests on Fouquet made it seem to Louis that his own friends and subjects were more charmed by the finance minister than by the king himself, and that Fouquet was actually flaunting his wealth and power. Rather than flattering Louis XTV, Fouquet's elaborate party offended the king's vanity. Louis would not admit this to anyone, of course. Instead, he found a convenient excuse to rid himself of a man who had inadvertently made him feel insecure. Such is the fate, in some form or other, of all those who unbalance the master's sense of self, poke holes in his vanity, or make him doubt his preeminence. When the evening began, Fouquet was at the top of the world. By the time it had ended, he was at the bottom. Voltaire, 1694-1778, observance of the law. In the early 1600s, the Italian astronomer and mathematician Galileo found himself in a precarious position. Fouquet, a man of wealth and ambition, threw a grand party hoping to win the king's trust and prove his worth. But as the guests smiled and admired Fouquet's display, King Louis felt overshadowed, as if his own light dimmed in comparison, and this quietly stung his pride. In the end, instead of gaining favor, Fouquet unknowingly planted seeds of doubt in the king's heart, leading to his downfall. Depended on the generosity of great rulers to support his research, and so, like all Renaissance scientists, he would sometimes make gifts of his inventions and discoveries to the leading patrons of the time. Once, for instance, he presented a military compass he had invented to the Duke of Gonzaga. Then he dedicated a book explaining the use of the compass to the Medicis. Both rulers were grateful, and through them Galileo was able to find more students to teach. No matter how great the discovery, however, his patrons usually paid him with gifts, not cash. This made for a life of constant insecurity and dependence. There must be an easier way, he thought. Galileo hit on a new strategy in 1610 when he discovered the moons of Jupiter. Instead of dividing the discovery among his patrons, giving one the telescope he had used, dedicating a book to another, and so on, as he had done in the past, he decided to focus exclusively on the Medicis. He chose the Medicis for one reason. Galileo, a curious man of science, often relied on the kindness of powerful leaders to help him with his work. He would share his inventions, like a special military compass, with rulers such as the Duke of Gonzaga, or write books for the Medicis to show his thanks. Though they appreciated his gifts, they often gave him treasures instead of money, leaving him to wonder if there might be a gentler path to follow. Shortly after Cosimo I had established the Medici dynasty in 1540, he had made Jupiter the mightiest of the gods. The Medici symboled a symbol of a power that went beyond politics and banking, one linked to ancient Rome and its divinities. Galileo turned his discovery of Jupiter's moons into a cosmic event, honoring the Medici's greatness. Shortly after the discovery, he announced that the bright stars, the moons of Jupiter, offered themselves in the heavens to his telescope at the same time as Cosimo II's enthronement. He said that the number of the moon sign foreign harmonized with the number of the Medicis. Cosimo II had 3 brothers, and that the moons orbited Jupiter as these 4 suns revolved around Cosimo I, the dynasty's founder. More than coincidence, this showed that the heavens themselves reflected the ascendancy. Galileo, a wise man of science, wanted to honor the powerful Medici family in a special way. He discovered the moons of Jupiter, 4 bright spots in the night sky, and named them after the 4 Medici brothers, showing how they moved around their father, the founder, just as the moons circle their mighty planet. This quiet connection between the stars and the family felt like a gentle sign of their greatness, written in the heavens. Of the Medici family. After he dedicated the discovery to the Medicis, Galileo commissioned an emblem representing Jupiter sitting on a cloud with the 4 stars circling about him, and presented this to Cosimo II as a symbol of his link to the stars. In 1610, Cosimo II made Galileo his official court philosopher and mathematician with a full salary. For a scientist, this was the coup of a lifetime. The days of begging for patronage were over. Interpretation. In one stroke, Galileo gained more with his new strategy than he had in years of begging. The reason is simple. All masters want to appear more brilliant than other people. They do not care about science or empirical truth or the latest invention. They care about their name and their glory. Galileo gave the Medicis infinitely more glory by linking their name with cosmic forces than he had by making them the patrons of some new scientific gadget or discovery. Scientists are not spared the vagaries of court life and patronage. They too must serve masters who hold the purse strings, and their great intellectual powers can make the master feel insecure, as if he were only there to supply the funds. Ugly, ignoble. Galileo, a clever man of science, found a special way to honor the powerful Medici family by connecting their name to the stars in the sky. He made a picture of Jupiter on a cloud, surrounded by 4 stars, and gave it to Cosimo II. as a quiet sign of their greatness, far beyond any small invention. This thoughtful gift brought him a high place in their court, with steady pay and a peaceful end to his days of asking for help. Job. The producer of a great work wants to feel he is more than just the provider of the financing. He wants to appear creative and powerful, and also more important than the work produced in his name. Instead of insecurity, you must give him glory. Galileo did not challenge the intellectual authority of the Medicis with his discovery or make them feel inferior in any way. By literally aligning them with the stars, he made them shine brilliantly among the courts of Italy. He did not outshine the master. He made the master outshine all others. Keys to power. Everyone has insecurities. When you show yourself in the world and display your talents, you naturally stir up all kinds of resentment, envy, and other manifestations of insecurity. This is to be expected. You cannot spend your life worrying about the petty feelings of others. With those above you, however, you must take a different approach. A person who supports a grand project, like a wealthy patron, longs to be seen as more than just someone with money. They wish to feel creative, strong, and even greater than the work they help create. So, instead of making them feel small or unsure, you should lift them up with honor just as Galileo did by connecting the Medicis to the stars, letting their light glow across the lands of Italy. When it comes to power, outshining the master is perhaps the worst mistake of all. Do not fool yourself into thinking that life has changed much since the days of Louis XV and the Medicis. Those who attain high standing in life are like kings and queens. They want to feel secure in their positions and superior to those around them in intelligence, wit, and charm. It is a deadly but common misperception to believe that by displaying and vaunting your gifts and talents, you are winning the master's affection. He may feign appreciation, but at his first opportunity, he will replace you with someone less intelligent, less attractive, less threatening, just as Louis XIV replaced the sparkling Fouquet with the bland Colbert, and, as with Louis, he will not admit the truth, but will find an excuse to rid himself of your presence. This law involves two rules that you must realize. First, you can inadvertently outshine a master simply by being yourself. There are masters. Power can be a delicate thing, like a quiet balance in a peaceful garden. If you shine too brightly, showing off your skills or cleverness, you might make someone above you feel small, even without meaning to. They may smile for a while, but deep down, they'll look for someone less dazzling to stand by their side, just to feel safe again. Who are more insecure than others, monstrously insecure, you may naturally outshine them by your charm and grace. No one had more natural talents than Astore Manfredi, Prince of Faenza. The most handsome of all the young princes of Italy, he captivated his subjects with his generosity and open spirit. In the year 1500, Cesare Borgia laid siege to Faenza. When the city surrendered, the citizens expected the worst from the cruel Borgia, who, however, decided to spare the town. He simply occupied its fortress, executed none of its citizens, and allowed Prince Manfredi, 18 at the time, to remain with his court in complete freedom. A few weeks later, those soldiers hauled Astore Manfredi away to a Roman prison. A year after that, his body was fished out of the river Tiber, a stone tied around his neck. Borgia justified the horrible deed with some sort of trumped-up charge of treason and conspiracy, but the real problem was that he was notoriously vain and insecure. The young man was outshining him without even trying. Given Manfredi's natural talents, the prince's mere presence made Borgia seem less attractive and charismatic. The lesson is simple. If you cannot help being charming and superior, you must learn to avoid such monsters of vanity. Young Astore Manfredi, a prince of a small Italian town, was loved by everyone for his kindness and bright spirit, shining like a warm light in a quiet room. In the year 1500, a powerful man named Cesare Borgia took over the town, and though he let Astore live freely at first, jealousy grew in his heart because the young prince's charm made him feel small. Soon, Astore was taken away, and his sad end came with a heavy stone in a dark river, teaching us to be careful around those who cannot bear to see others shine. Either that, or find a way to mute your good qualities when in the company of a Cesare Borgia. Second, never imagine clear that your advice is merely an echo of his advice. If you surpass your master in wit, it is okay to play the role of the court jester, but do not make him appear cold and surly by comparison. Tone down your humor if necessary, and find ways to make him seem the dispenser of amusement and good cheer. If you are naturally more sociable and generous than your master, be careful not to be the cloud that blocks his radiance from others. He must appear as the sun around which everyone revolves, radiating power and brilliance, the center of attention. If you are thrust into the position of entertaining him, a display of your limited means may win you his sympathy. Any attempt to impress him with your grace and generosity. A wise person once said that when you're near someone powerful, like a great leader, it's best to soften your own bright qualities, letting theirs shine instead. If you're funnier or kinder, gently step back, making sure they seem like the source of laughter and warmth. The glowing sun everyone looks to. This way, you help them feel important, and your quiet care can even touch their heart. Prove fatal, learn from Fouquet, or pay the price. In all of these cases, it is not a weakness to disguise your strengths if in the end they lead to power. By letting others outshine you, you remain in control instead of being a victim of their insecurity. This will all come in handy the day you decide to rise above your inferior status. If, like Galileo, you can make your master shine even more in the eyes of others, then you are a godsend, and you will be instantly promoted. Image, the stars in the sky. There can be only one sun at a time. Never obscure the sunlight or rival the sun's brilliance. Rather, fade into the sky and find ways to heighten the master star's intensity, authority. Avoid outshining the master. All superiority is odious, but the superiority of a subject over his prince is not only stupid, it is fatal. This is a lesson that the stars in the sky teach us. They may be related to the sun and just as brilliant, but they never appear in her company. Balthazar Gratian, 1601-1658, reversal. You cannot worry about upsetting every person you come across, but you must be selectively cruel. If your superior is a falling star, there's a quiet lesson rests in these words, one about being careful not to shine too brightly over those who lead you. Think of the stars at night, how they glow softly beside the sun, never trying to outdo its light, but instead adding to its beauty by staying dim in its presence. This way, you keep peace and hold your own strength, waiting for the right moment to rise, always gentle and wise. There's nothing to fear from outshining him. Do not be merciful. Your master had no such scruples in his own cold-blooded climb to the top. Gauge his strength. If he is weak, discreetly hasten his downfall, outdo, outcharm, outsmart him at key moments. If he is very weak and ready to fall, let nature take its course. Do not risk outshining a feeble superior, and yet might appear cruel or spiteful. But if your master is firm in his position, yet you know yourself to be the more capable, bide your time and be patient. It is the natural course of things that power eventually fades and weakens. Your master will fall someday, and if you play it right, you will outlive and someday outshine him. Law 2. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies. Judgment, be wary of friends. They will betray you more quickly, for they are easily aroused to envy. They also become spoiled and tyrannical. But hire a former enemy and he will be more loyal than a friend because he has more to prove. In fact, you have more to fear from friends than from enemies. If you have no enemies, find a way to make them. Transgression of the law. In the mid-9th century AD, a young man named a quiet thought rests here about power and those above you. If the one who leads you is losing their strength, like a star dimming in the night sky, don't hold back from shining brighter when the moment feels right, but do so with care and patience. Wait gently, for the natural way of things for even the strongest will fade in time, and your own light may glow when the time comes. Michael III assumed the throne of the Byzantine Empire. His mother, the Empress Theodora, had been banished to a nunnery, and her lover, Theoctistus, had been murdered. At the head of the conspiracy to depose Theodora and enthrone Michael had been Michael's uncle, Bardas, a man of intelligence and ambition. Michael was now a young, inexperienced ruler, surrounded by intriguers, murderers, and profligates. In this time of peril, he needed someone he could trust as his counselor, and his thoughts turned to Basilius, his best friend. Basilius had no experience whatsoever in government and politics. In fact, he was the head of the royal stables, but he had proven his love and gratitude time and again. To have a good enemy, choose a friend. He knows where to strike. Diane de Poitiers, 1499-1566, mistress of Henri II of France. They had met a few years before, when Michael had been visiting the stables just as a wild horse got loose. Basilius, a young groom from peasant Macedonian stock, had saved Michael's life. The groom's strength and courage had impressed Michael, who immediately raised Basilius from the obscurity of being a horse trainer to the position of head of the stables. He loaded his friend with gifts and favors, and they became inseparable. Young Michael, just a boy when he became ruler of a vast empire, found himself alone among whispers and dangers in a grand palace. His mother was sent away, her trusted friend gone forever, and his uncle, a clever and hungry man, had helped place him on the throne. In this quiet, uncertain time, Michael turned to his dearest friend, Basilius, a simple man who cared for horses, knowing nothing of power or plots, but whose heart was true, proven by a brave moment when he saved Michael from a wild horse long ago. Their bond, built on trust and kindness, became his comfort in a world of shadows. Basilius was sent to the finest school in Byzantium, and the crude peasant became a cultured and sophisticated courtier. Every time I bestow a vacant office, I make 100 discontented persons and one ingrate. Louis XIV, 1638-1715. Now Michael was emperor, and in need of someone loyal. Who could he better trust with the post of chamberlain and chief counselor than a young man who owed him everything? Basilius could be trained for the job, and Michael loved him like a brother. Ignoring the advice of those who recommended the much more qualified Bardas, Michael chose his friend. Thus, for my own part, I'll have more than once been deceived by the person I loved most, and of whose love, above everyone else's, I have been most confident, so that I believe that you may be right to love and serve one person above all others, according to merit and worth, but never to trust so much in this tempting trap of friendship as to have cause to repent of it later on. Baldassare Castiglione, 1478. Young Basilius, once a simple peasant, was sent to a grand school in a faraway city where he learned the ways of elegance and charm. Emperor Michael, needing someone he could truly rely on, picked Basilius for an important role, trusting him like family, even though wiser voices suggested another man. And yet, as time passes, even the deepest trust in a friend can sometimes lead to quiet sorrow, a lesson whispered gently by the heart. 1529. Basilius learned well and was soon advising the emperor on all matters of state. The only problem seemed to be money. Basilius never had enough. Exposure to the splendor of Byzantine court life made him avaricious for the perks of power. Michael doubled, then tripled his salary, ennobled him, and married him off to his own mistress, Eudoxia Ingerina. Keeping such a trusted friend and advisor satisfied was worth any price, but more trouble was to come. Bardas was now head of the army, and Basilius convinced Michael that the man was hopelessly ambitious. Under the illusion that he could control his nephew, Bardas had conspired to put him on the throne, and he could conspire again, this time to get rid of Michael and assume the crown himself. Basilius poured poison into Michael's ear until the emperor agreed to have his uncle murdered. During a great horse race, Basilius closed in on Bardas in the crowd and stabbed him to death. Soon after, Basilius asked that he replace Bardas as head of the army, where he could keep control of the realm and quell rebellion. This was granted. Now Basilius' power and wealth only grew, and a few years later, Michael, in financial straits from his own extravagance, asked him to pay back some of the money he had borrowed over the years. Basilius was a clever man who quickly became a trusted helper to the emperor, guiding him in important decisions. Even though he was given more money, fancy titles, and a special marriage, his hunger for power and wealth never seemed to fade, and soon darker plans grew in his heart. Quietly, he turned the emperor against a family member, leading to a terrible act in a crowded place, and step by step, Basilius took more control until his influence was everywhere. To Michael's shock and astonishment, Basilius refused, with a look of such impudence that the emperor suddenly realized his predicament. The former stable boy had more money, more allies in the army and senate, and in the end more power than the emperor himself. A few weeks later, after a night of heavy drinking, Michael awoke to find himself surrounded by soldiers. Basilius watched as they stabbed the emperor to death. Then, after proclaiming himself emperor, he rode his horse through the streets of Byzantium, brandishing the head of his former benefactor and best friend at the end of a long pike. The snake, the farmer, and the heron. A snake chased by hunters asked a farmer to save its life. To hide it from its pursuers, the farmer squatted and let the snake crawl into his belly. But when the danger had passed and the farmer asked the snake to come out, the snake refused. It was warm and safe inside. On his way home, the man saw a heron and went up to him and whispered. Michael felt a deep surprise when Basilius, once a simple stable boy, turned against him with a bold, disrespectful stare. It became clear to Michael that Basilius had gathered more wealth, more friends in the army and senate, and even more power than he, the emperor, ever held. Soon after, in a quiet, tragic moment, soldiers surrounded Michael, and Basilius took his place as ruler, leaving behind a heavy shadow of betrayal. As for the story of the snake, a farmer kindly hid the creature inside himself to save it from hunters. But when the danger passed, the snake stayed, finding comfort and warmth within. On his way home, the farmer shared his trouble with a wise heron, hoping for a gentle way to solve this strange burden. What had happened? The heron told him to squat and strain to eject the snake. When the snake snuck its head out, the heron caught it, pulled it out, and killed it. The farmer was worried that the snake's poison might still be inside him, and the heron told him that the cure for snake poison was to cook and eat 6 white fowl. "You are a white fowl," said the farmer. "You'll do for a start." He grabbed the heron, put it in a bag, and carried it home, where he hung it up while he told his wife what had happened. "I'm surprised at you," said the wife. "The bird does you a kindness, rids you of the evil in your belly, saves your life, in fact, yet you catch it and talk of killing it." She immediately released the heron, and it flew away. But on its way, it gouged out her eyes. Moral: when you see water flowing uphill, it means that someone is repaying a kindness. African folk tale. Interpretation: Michael, i.e., staked his future on the sense of gratitude he thought Basilius must feel for him. Surely Basilius would serve him best. He owed the emperor his wealth, his education, and his position. Then, once Basilius was in power, anything he needed it was best to give to him, strengthening the bonds between the two men. It was a kind heron once helped a farmer by pulling a dangerous snake from his belly, saving his life with great care. Though the farmer was thankful at first, he soon turned on the heron, planning to cook it as part of a cure for any leftover poison. His wife, full of pity, set the bird free. But the story ends with a quiet sadness as the heron, hurt by betrayal, left her with a lasting wound. Only on the fateful day when the emperor saw that impudent smile on Basilius' face that he realized his deadly mistake. He had created a monster. He had allowed a man to see power up close, a man who then wanted more, who asked for anything and got it, who felt encumbered by the charity he had received and simply did what many people do. In such a situation, they forget the favors they have received and imagine they have earned their success by their own merits. At Michael's moment of realization, he could still have saved his own life, but friendship and love blind every man to their interests. Nobody believes a friend can betray, and Michael went on disbelieving until the day his head ended up on a pike. Lord, protect me from my friends. I can take care of my enemies. Voltaire, 1694, 1778. Observance of the law. For several Emperor Michael, on a quiet and heavy day, saw a daring smile on Basilius's face and felt a chill in his heart. He understood then that he had let Basilius get too close to power, turning him into someone hungry for more, someone who forgot the kindness shown to him and believed he deserved it all on his own. Even in that moment, Michael could have protected himself, but his trust and care for a friend clouded his eyes, as trust often does, until it was too late. Centuries after the fall of the Han Dynasty AD 222, Chinese history followed the same pattern of violent and bloody coups, one after the other. Army men would plot to kill a weak emperor, then would replace him on the dragon throne with a strong general. The general would start a new dynasty and crown himself emperor. To ensure his own survival, he would kill off his fellow generals. A few years later, however, the pattern would resume. New generals would rise up and assassinate him or his sons in their turn. To be emperor of China was to be alone, surrounded by a pack of enemies, yet was the least powerful, least secure position in the realm. In AD 959, General Chao Kuang-yin became Emperor Sung. He knew the odds, the probability that within a year or two he would be murdered. How could he break the pattern? Soon after becoming emperor, Sung ordered a banquet to celebrate the new dynasty and invited the most powerful commanders in the army. After they had drunk much wine, he dismissed the guards and everybody else except the generals, who now feared he would murder them in one fell swoop. Instead, he addressed them. The whole day is spent in fear, and I am unhappy both at the table and in my bed. For which one of you? Long ago in China, the story of emperors was often a sad and dangerous one. Strong army leaders would overthrow a weak ruler, taking the throne for themselves, only to live in fear of being betrayed by their own friends. Emperor Sung, who came to power in the year 959, understood this heavy burden and chose a different path by speaking honestly to his generals at a quiet banquet, sharing his deep wish for peace instead of fear. You does not dream of ascending the throne. I do not doubt your allegiance, but if by some chance your subordinates, seeking wealth and position, were to force the emperor's yellow robe upon you in turn, how could you refuse it? Drunk and fearing for their lives, the generals proclaimed their innocence and their loyalty. But Sung had other ideas. The best way to pass one's days is in peaceful enjoyment of riches and honor. If you are willing to give up your commands, I am ready to provide you with fine estates and beautiful dwellings where you may take your pleasure with singers and girls as your companions. The astonished generals realized that instead of a life of anxiety and struggle, Sung was offering them riches and security. The next day, all of the generals tendered their resignations, and they retired as nobles to the estates that Sung bestowed on them. There are men who think, therefore, that a wise prince ought, when he has the chance, to foment astutely some enmity, so that by suppressing it he will augment his greatness. A leader named Sung once spoke to his generals, who had fought hard and faced many dangers. He offered them a quiet life, with beautiful homes and the chance to rest with music and kind company, instead of endless worry and battle. They accepted this gentle gift, stepping away from their heavy duties, and lived peacefully on the lands he gave them. and especially new ones, have found more faith and more usefulness in those men, whom at the beginning of their power they regarded with suspicion, than in those they at first confided in. Pandolfo Petrucci, Prince of Siena, governed his state more bevi those whom he suspected than by others. Nicolas Machiavelli, 1469-1527. In one stroke, Sung turned a pack of friendly wolves, who would likely have betrayed him, into a group of docile lambs, far from all power. Over the next few years, Sung continued his campaign to secure his rule. In AD 971, King Liu of the southern Han finally surrendered to him after years of rebellion. To Liu's astonishment, Sung gave him a rank in the imperial court and invited him to the palace to seal their newfound friendship with wine. As King Liu took the glass that Sung offered him, he hesitated, fearing it contained poison. "Your subjects' crimes certainly merit death," he cried out, "but I beg your majesty to spare your subject's life. Indeed, I dare not drink this wine." Emperor Sung laughed. Princes, especially those just starting to rule, often find more trust and help in people they first doubted, rather than those they trusted right away. Pandolfo Petrucci, a leader in Siena, guided his land better by relying on those he suspected, keeping them close to watch them. In another tale, Emperor Sung turned cunning friends who might have turned against him into gentle followers, far from any real power, and even won over a rebel king with kindness, sharing a drink to prove no harm was meant. Laughed, took the glass from Liu, and swallowed it himself. There was no poison. From then on, Liu became his most trusted and loyal friend. At the time, China had splintered into many smaller kingdoms. When Choyan, Shu, the king of one of these, was defeated, Sung's ministers advised the emperor to lock this rebel up. They presented documents proving that he was still conspiring to kill Sung. When Qian Shu came to visit the emperor, however, instead of locking him up, Sung honored him. He also gave him a package, which he told the former king to open when he was halfway home. Qian Shu opened the bundle on his return journey and saw that it contained all the papers documenting his conspiracy. He realized that Sung knew of his murderous plans, yet had spared him nonetheless. This generosity won him over, and he too became one of Sung's most loyal vassals. A Brahmin, a great expert in Veda, who has become a great archer as well, offers his services to his good friend who is now the king. The Brahmin cries out when he sees the king, "Recognize me, your friend." The king answers him with contempt and then explains, "Yes, we were friends before, but our friendship was based on what power we had. I was friends with you, good Brahmin, because it served my purpose." Long ago, in a land broken into many small kingdoms, there was an emperor named Sung who showed kindness even to those who plotted against him. When a defeated king, Qian Shu, came to him, Sung did not punish him, but gave him a gift of trust, returning papers that showed the man's secret plans, letting him go free with a gentle heart. This act turned enemies into friends, binding them with loyalty, as kindness often does in quiet ways. No pauper is friend to the rich, no fool to the wise, no coward to the brave. An old friend. Who needs him? It is two men of equal wealth and equal birth who contract friendship and marriage, not a rich man and a pauper. An old friend. Who needs him? The Mahabharata. C. 3rd century BC. Interpretation. A Chinese proverb compares friends to the jaws and teeth of a dangerous animal. If you are not careful, you will find them chewing you up. Emperor Sung knew the jaws he was passing between when he assumed the throne. His friends in the army would chew him up like meat. And if he somehow survived, his friends in the government would have him for supper. Emperor Sung would have no truck with friends. He bribed his fellow generals with splendid estates and kept them far away. This was a much better way to emasculate them than killing them, which would only have led other generals to seek vengeance. And Sung would have nothing to do with friendly ministers. More often than not, they would end up drinking his famous cup of poisoned wine. Instead of relying on friends, A long time ago, in ancient stories from India, wise words told us that friendships work best between people who are alike in wealth or strength, not between those who are very different, like a poor person and a rich one. In another tale from China, friends are compared to the sharp teeth of a wild animal, ready to harm you if you're not careful. Emperor Sung, a ruler from history, understood this danger and chose to keep his army friends and government helpers at a distance, protecting himself with gifts instead of trust, so no one could turn against him. Sung used his enemies, one after the other, transforming them into far more reliable subjects. While a friend expects more and more favors and seethes with jealousy, these former enemies expected nothing and got everything. A man suddenly spared the guillotine is a grateful man indeed, and will go to the ends of the earth for the man who has pardoned him. In time, these former enemies became Sung's most trusted friends. Pick up a bee from kindness and learn the limitations of kindness. Sufi proverb, and Sung was finally able to break the pattern of coups, violence, and civil war. The Sung dynasty ruled China for more than 300 years. In a speech Abraham Lincoln delivered at the height of the Civil War, he referred to the Southerners as fellow human beings who were in error. An elderly lady chastised him for not calling them irreconcilable enemies who must be destroyed. "Why, madam," Lincoln replied, "do I not destroy my enemies when I make them my friends?" Keys to power. It is natural to want to employ your friends when you find yourself in times of Sung, a wise leader, chose a different path by turning his enemies into loyal helpers. Instead of trusting friends who might grow jealous or ask for too much, he gave kindness to those who expected nothing, and they became deeply thankful, ready to stand by him. Even Abraham Lincoln spoke of his foes as people who were simply mistaken, believing that making them friends was the truest way to end conflict. The world is a harsh place, and your friends soften the harshness. Besides, you know them. Why depend on a stranger when you have a friend at hand? Men are more ready to repay an injury than a benefit, because gratitude is a burden and revenge a pleasure. Tacitus, C.A.D. 55-120. The problem is that you often do not know your friends as well as you imagine. Friends often agree on things in order to avoid an argument. They cover up their unpleasant qualities so as to not offend each other. They laugh extra hard at each other's jokes. Since honesty rarely strengthens friendship, you may never know how a friend truly feels. Friends will say that they love your poetry, adore your music, envy your taste in clothes. Maybe they mean it, often they do not. When you decide to hire a friend, you gradually discover the qualities he or she has kept hidden. Strangely enough, it is your act of kindness that unbalances everything. People want to feel they deserve their good fortune. The receipt of a favor can become oppressive. It means you have been chosen because you are a friend, not necessarily because you are deserving. There is almost a touch of condescension in the act of hiring friends that secretly afflicts them. The injury will come. Friendship can be a gentle shelter in a tough world, a place where familiar faces bring comfort and ease. Sometimes, though, we don't see our friends as clearly as we think, because they might hide their true thoughts to keep peace or laugh a little louder to make us feel good. It's a quiet sadness when kindness, like giving a job to a friend, can feel heavy to them, as if they're not sure they've truly earned it. Come out slowly, a little more honesty, flashes of resentment and envy here and there, and before you know it, your friendship fades. The more favors and gifts you supply to revive the friendship, the less gratitude you receive. Ingratitude has a long and deep history. It has demonstrated its powers for so many centuries that it is truly amazing that people continue to underestimate them. Better to be wary. If you never expect gratitude from a friend, you will be pleasantly surprised when they do prove grateful. The problem with using or hiring friends is that it will inevitably limit your power. The friend is rarely the one who is most able to help you, and in the end, skill and competence are far more important than friendly feelings. Michael III had a man right under his nose who would have steered him right and kept him alive. That man was Bardas. Proi Ling by our 111 King Hero chanced upon a time speaking with one of his enemies to be told in a reproachful manner that he had stinking breath. Whereupon the good king, being somewhat dismayed in himself, friendship can sometimes slip away quietly, like a soft shadow fading in the evening. A little bitterness or jealousy might creep in, and even if you try to mend things with kind acts or gifts, the thanks you hope for may not come. It's wise to be careful, to not expect too much, so any kindness returned feels like a gentle, unexpected warmth. As soon as he returned home, chided his wife, "How does it happen that you never told me of this problem?" The woman, being a simple, chaste, and harmless dame, said, "Sir, L had thought all men breath had smelled so. Thus it is plain that faults that are evident to the senses, gross and corporal, or otherwise notorious to the world, we know by our enemies sooner than by our friends and familiars." Plutarch, CAD 46, 120. All working situations require a kind of distance between people. You are trying to work, not make friends. Friendliness, real or false, only obscures that fact. The key to power, then, is the ability to judge who is best able to further your interests in all situations. Keep friends for friendship, but work with the skilled and competent. Your enemies, on the other hand, are an untapped gold mine that you must learn to exploit. When Talleyrand, Napoleon, a wise king, upon learning of a hidden flaw, turned to his gentle wife with a quiet question about why she never spoke of it. She answered softly that she thought it was just how things were, not knowing any different. This teaches us, in a hushed way, that sometimes those who oppose us see our weaknesses more clearly than those who care for us, and we can learn from them if we listen. Napoleon's foreign minister, decided in 1807 that his boss was leading France to ruin and the time had come to turn against him. He understood the dangers of conspiring against the emperor. He needed a partner, a confederate. What friend could he trust in such a project? He chose Joseph Fouché, head of the secret police, his most hated enemy, a man who had even tried to have him assassinated. He knew that their former hatred would create an opportunity for an emotional reconciliation. He knew that Fouché would expect nothing from him, and in fact, would work to prove that he was worthy of Talleyrand's choice. A person who has something to prove will move mountains for you. Finally, he knew that his relationship with Fouché would be based on mutual self-interest and would not be contaminated by personal feeling. The selection proved perfect. Although the conspirators did not succeed in toppling Napoleon, the union of such powerful but unlikely partners generated much interest in the cause. Opposition to the emperor slowly began to spread, and from then on, Talleyrand and Fouché. Talleyrand, a clever man working for Napoleon, felt deep in his heart that his leader was guiding their country toward trouble. He decided to work against him, but knew he couldn't do it alone. So he picked an old enemy, a man named Fouché, who once wished him harm, to be his partner. Together, their shared goals tied them close, and though they didn't win, their surprising teamwork stirred quiet whispers of change among others. Had a fruitful working relationship. Whenever you can, bury the hatchet with an enemy and make a point of putting him in your service. As Lincoln said, you destroy an enemy when you make a friend of him. In 1971, during the Vietnam War, Henry Kissinger was the target of an unsuccessful kidnapping attempt, a conspiracy involving, among others, the renowned anti-war activist priests, the Berrigan brothers, 4 more Catholic priests, and 4 nuns. In private, without informing the Secret Service or the Justice Department, Kissinger arranged a Saturday morning meeting with 3 of the alleged kidnappers. Explaining to his guests that he would have most American soldiers out of Vietnam by mid-1972, he completely charmed them. They gave him some Kidnap Kissinger buttons, and one of them remained a friend of his for years, visiting him on several occasions. This was not just a one-time ploy. Kissinger made a policy of working with those who disagreed with him. Colleagues commented that he seemed to get along better with his enemies than with his friends. Without enemies around us, we grow lazy. An enemy at our heels sharpens our wits, keeping us focused and Talleyrand and Fouché, once at odds, found a way to work together with good results. Think of it like two neighbors who used to argue over a fence, but then decided to help each other tend their gardens instead. Even Henry Kissinger, during a tough time in history, turned people who opposed him into allies by listening and speaking kindly, showing that an enemy can become a friend if you reach out with care. Alert. It is sometimes better, then, to use enemies as enemies rather than transforming them into friends or allies. Mao Zedong saw conflict as key in his approach to power. In 1937, the Japanese invaded China, interrupting the civil war between Mao's communists and their enemy, the nationalists. Fearing that the Japanese would wipe them out, some communist leaders advocated leaving the nationalists to fight the Japanese and using the time to recuperate. Mao disagreed. The Japanese could not possibly defeat and occupy a vast country like China for long. Once they left, the communists would have grown rusty if they'd been out of combat for several years and would be ill prepared to reopen their struggle with the nationalists. To fight a formidable foe like the Japanese, in fact, would be the perfect training for the communist ragtag army. Mao's plan was adopted, and it worked. By the time the Japanese finally retreated, the communists had gained the fighting experience that helped them defeat the nationalists. Years later, a Japanese visitor tried to apologize to Mao for his country's invasion of China. Mao interrupted, "Should I not thank you?" A wise leader named Mao once believed that facing enemies directly could be more helpful than turning them into friends. When the Japanese invaded China in 1937, interrupting a fight between Mao's group and another, he chose to battle the invaders instead of stepping back, thinking this struggle would make his people stronger for future challenges. As time passed, this hard experience indeed prepared them well, and Mao later thanked a visitor from Japan for the unexpected lesson that conflict brought. Instead, without a worthy opponent, he explained, a man or group cannot grow stronger. Mao's strategy of constant conflict has several key components. First, be certain that in the long run, you will emerge victorious. Never pick a fight with someone you are not sure you can defeat, as Mao knew the Japanese would be defeated in time. Second, if you have no apparent enemies, you must sometimes set up a convenient target, even turning a friend into an enemy. Mao used this tactic time and again in politics. Third, use such enemies to define your cause more clearly to the public, even framing it as a struggle of good against evil. Mao actually encouraged China's disagreements with the Soviet Union and the United States. Without clear-cut enemies, he believed his people would lose any sense of what Chinese communism meant. A sharply defined enemy is a far stronger argument for your side than all the words you could possibly put together. Never let the presence of enemies upset or distress you. You are far better off with a declared opponent or two than not knowing where your real enemies lie. The man of power welcomes conflict, using enemies to enhance his reputation as a sure-footed fighter who can be. A wise leader once shared that without a strong challenge, a person or a group cannot become better or tougher. Much like a tree needs wind to grow sturdy. He believed in always having a struggle, choosing battles you're sure to win in the end, and sometimes even making an opponent out of a friend to keep everyone focused. This way, the fight helps show others what you stand for, clear as a quiet stream, guiding your purpose with calm strength. Relied upon in times of uncertainty. Image, the jaws of ingratitude. Knowing what would happen if you put a finger in the mouth of a lion, you would stay clear of it. With friends, you will have no such caution, and if you hire them, they will eat you alive with ingratitude. Authority. Know how to use enemies for your own profit. You must learn to grab a sword, not by its blade, which would cut you, but by the handle which allows you to defend yourself. The wise man profits more from his enemies than a fool from his friends. Balthazar Gracian, 1601-1658, reversal. Although it is generally best not to mix work with friendship, there are times when a friend can be used to greater effect than an enemy. A man of power, for example, often has dirty work that has to be done, but for the sake of appearances, it is generally preferable to have other people do it for him. Friends often do this the best, since their affection for him makes them willing to take chances. Also, if your plans go awry for some reason, you can use a friend as a convenient scapegoat. This fall of the favorite was a trick often used by kings and sovereigns. They would let their A wise person once wrote about the dangers of mixing friendship with power or work. Just as you wouldn't put your hand near a lion's mouth because it might bite, you should be careful with friends in important matters, for they might hurt you with their lack of thanks or loyalty. Instead, learn to handle tough situations like holding a sword by its handle, not its sharp edge, using even those who oppose you to protect yourself and grow stronger. Sometimes, though, a friend can be more helpful than an enemy, quietly doing difficult tasks for someone in charge because of their care and trust. If things go wrong, they might even take the blame to shield you. Let this thought rest with you now as you drift towards sleep. Closest friend at court take the fall for a mistake, since the public would not believe that they would deliberately sacrifice a friend for such a purpose. Of course, after you play that card, you have lost your friend forever. It is best, then, to reserve the scapegoat role for someone who is close to you, but not too close. Finally, the problem about working with friends is that it confuses the boundaries and distances that working requires. But if both partners in the arrangement understand the dangers involved, a friend often can be employed to great effect. You must never let your guard down in such a venture, however. Always be on the lookout for any signs of emotional disturbance, such as envy and ingratitude. Nothing is stable in the realm of power, and even the closest of friends can be transformed into the worst of enemies. Law 3. Conceal your intentions' judgment. Keep people off balance and in the dark by never revealing the purpose behind your actions. If they have no clue what you are up to, they cannot prepare a defense. Guide them far enough down the wrong path, envelop them in enough smoke. Power can be a tricky game, played even by kings and leaders long ago. They might let a close friend take the blame for a mistake, knowing others wouldn't suspect such a choice, though it means losing that friend forever. It's wiser to pick someone near, but not too dear for such a role. And to stay watchful, for even trusted bonds can quietly turn to bitterness in the shifting world of trust. And by the time they realize your intentions, it will be too late. Part I use decoyed objects of desire and red herrings to throw people off the scent. If at any point in the deception you practice, people have the slightest suspicion tied to your intentions, all is lost. Do not give them the chance to sense what you are up to. Throw them off the scent by dragging red herrings across the path. Use false sincerity, send ambiguous signals, set up misleading objects of desire. Unable to distinguish the genuine from the false, they cannot pick out your real goal. Transgression of the law. Over several weeks, Ninon de Lenclos, the most infamous courtesan of 17th century France, listened patiently as the Marquis de Sévigné explained his struggles in pursuing a beautiful but difficult young countess. Ninon was 62 at the time, and more than experienced in matters of love. The Marquis was a lad of 22, handsome, dashing, but hopelessly inexperienced in romance. At first, Ninon was amused to hear the Marquis. Ninon de Lenclos, a wise woman from long ago in France, watched quietly as a young man shared his troubles in winning a lady's heart. She knew much about love, having lived through many years of it herself, and could see how lost this young marquis was, even if he looked charming and bold. Her patience held at first, but soon her heart grew heavy with his endless mistakes, waiting for the right moment to guide him gently. Talk about his mistakes, but finally she had had enough. Unable to bear ineptitude in any realm, least of all in seducing a woman, she decided to take the young man under her wing. First, he had to understand that this was war, and that the beautiful countess was a citadel to which he had to lay siege as carefully as any general. Every step had to be planned and executed with the utmost attention to detail and nuance. Instructing the Marquis to start over, Ninon told him to approach the countess with a bit of distance, an air of nonchalance. The next time the two were alone together, she said, he would confide in the countess as would a friend but not a potential lover. This was to throw her off the scent. The countess was no longer to take his interest in her for granted. Perhaps he was only interested in friendship. Ninon planned ahead. Once the countess was confused, it would be time to make her jealous. At the next encounter, at a major fete in Paris, the Marquis would show up with a beautiful young woman at his side. This beautiful young woman had equally beautiful friends, so that wherever the Countess would now see the Marquis, he would be surrounded by the most stunning young women in Paris. A wise woman, seeing a young man struggle to win a lady's heart, chose to guide him with care. She taught him to think of this as a quiet game of strategy, like a general planning to capture a strong castle, where every move must be gentle and well thought out. She advised him to step back a little, to act calm and friendly, letting the lady wonder about his true feelings, easing into trust as the first soft step. Not only would the Countess be seething with jealousy, she would come to see the Marquis as someone who was desired by others. It was hard for Ninon to make the Marquis understand, but she patiently explained that a woman who is interested in a man wants to see that other women are interested in him too. Not only does that give him instant value, it makes it all the more satisfying to snatch him from their clutches. Once the Countess was jealous but intrigued, it would be time to beguile her. On Ninon's instructions, the Marquis would fail to show up at affairs where the Countess expected to see him. Then suddenly he would appear at salons he had never frequented before, but that the Countess attended often. She would be unable to predict his moves. All of this would push her into the state of emotional contusion that is a prerequisite for successful seduction. These moves were executed and took several weeks. Ninon, with her quiet wisdom, shared a gentle plan with the Marquis about winning a lady's heart. She told him that making the Countess feel a little jealous by showing that others admired him would spark her interest and make her want to be closer to him. Soon, by appearing and disappearing at unexpected times, he would keep her guessing, stirring her feelings in a soft, puzzling way as the weeks passed by. Marquis' progress through her network of spies, she heard how the Countess would laugh a little harder at his witticisms, listen more closely to his stories. She heard that the Countess was suddenly asking questions about him. Her friends told her that at social affairs, the Countess would often look up at the Marquis, following his steps. Ninon felt certain that the young woman was falling under his spell. It was a matter of weeks now, maybe a month or two, but if all went smoothly, the citadel would fall. A few days later, the Marquis was at the Countess's home. They were alone. Suddenly, he was a different man. This time acting on his own impulse rather than following Ninon's instructions. He took the Countess's hands and told her he was in love with her. The young woman seemed confused, a reaction he did not expect. She became polite, then excused herself. For the rest of the evening, she avoided his eyes, was not there to say goodnight to him. The next few times he visited, he was told she was not at home. When she finally admitted him again, the two felt awkward and uncomfortable with each other. The spell was broken. Interpretation: Ninon de Lenclos knew everything about the art of love. The greatest writ, airs, things. Ninon, a wise woman who understood the ways of the heart, watched carefully as the Marquis tried to win over the Countess, learning through whispers and friends how the young woman laughed more at his words and watched him closely at gatherings. She believed the Countess was slowly falling for him, like a flower turning toward the sun, and thought it would only take a little more time for her heart to open fully. But when the Marquis acted on his own, speaking of love too soon, the gentle magic between them faded, leaving only silence and distance in its place. Bankers and politicians of the time had been her lover's men, like La Rochefoucauld, Molière, and Richelieu. Seduction was a game to her, to be practiced with skill. As she got older and her reputation grew, the most important families in France would send their sons to her to be instructed in matters of love. Ninon knew that men and women are very different, but when it comes to seduction, they feel the same. Deep down inside, they often sense when they are being seduced, but they give in because they enjoy the feeling of being led along. It is a pleasure to let go and to allow the other person to detour you into a strange country. Everything in seduction, however, depends on suggestion. You cannot announce your intentions or reveal them directly in words. Instead, you must throw your targets off the scent. To surrender to your guidance, they must be appropriately confused. You have to scramble your signals, appear interested in another man or woman, the decoy, then hint at being interested in the target, then feign indifference, on and on. Such patterns not only confuse. Ninon, a woman of great charm, knew how to draw people close with a quiet kind of magic. She played the game of love like a gentle dance, never showing her true thoughts, but instead leaving little hints and mixed signs that kept others guessing. As you drift off, think of her as a guide in a mysterious garden, leading others down winding paths with a soft, unspoken promise of wonder. They excite. Imagine this story from the Countess' perspective. After a few of the Marquis moves, she sensed the Marquis was playing some sort of game, but the game delighted her. She did not know where he was leading her, but so much the better. His moves intrigued her, each of them keeping her waiting for the next one. She even enjoyed her jealousy and contusion, for sometimes any emotion is better than the boredom of security. Perhaps the Marquis had ulterior motives. Most men do, but she was willing to wait and see, and probably if she had been made to wait long enough, what he was up to would not have mattered. The moment the Marquis uttered that fatal word love, however, all was changed. This was no longer a game with moves, it was an artless show of passion. His intention was revealed. He was seducing her. This put everything he had done in a new light. All that before had been charming now seemed ugly and conniving. The Countess felt embarrassed and used. A door closed that would never open again. Do not be held a cheat, even though it is impossible to live today without being one. Let your greatest cunning lie in covering up what looks like cunning. Balthasar Gracian, 1601-1658. The Countess, in this quiet tale, felt a spark of excitement as she noticed the Marquis playing a mysterious game with her. She didn't know his plans, but that mystery charmed her, making even her confusion and little jealousies feel alive, far better than the dull safety of knowing everything. When he spoke of love, though, the game turned heavy, his true aim showing, and all his past charm faded into something cold and tricky, closing her heart to him forever. Observance of the law. In 1850, the young Otto von Bismarck, then a 35-year-old deputy in the Prussian parliament, was at a turning point in his career. The issues of the day were the unification of the many states, including Prussia, into which Germany was then divided, and a war against Austria, the powerful neighbor to the south that hoped to keep the Germans weak and at odds, even threatening to intervene if they tried to unite. Prince William, next in line to be Prussia's king, was in favor of going to war, and the parliament rallied to the cause, prepared to back any mobilization of troops. The only ones to oppose war were the present king, Frederick William IV, and his ministers, who preferred to appease the powerful Austrians. Throughout his career, Bismarck had been a loyal, even passionate supporter of Prussian might and power. He dreamed of German unification, of going to war against Austria and humiliating the country that for so long had kept Germany divided. A former soldier, he saw warfare as a glorious business. This, after all, was the man who young Otto von Bismarck, a man in the Prussian parliament back in 1880, found himself at a crossroads in his life. Many around him, including Prince William, wanted to bring the scattered German states together as one and fight against the strong neighbor, Austria, who wished to keep them apart and weak. Though Otto had always believed deeply in Prussia's strength and dreamed of a united Germany, not everyone agreed on this path, especially the king and his close advisors, who wanted to avoid conflict and keep peace with Austria. Years later would say, the great questions of the time will be decided, not by speeches and resolutions, but by iron and blood. Passionate patriot and lover of military glory, Bismarck nevertheless gave a speech in Parliament at the height of the war fever that astonished all who heard it. Woe unto the statesman, he said, who makes war without a reason that will still be valid when the war is over. After the war, you will all look differently at these questions. Will you then have the courage to turn to the peasant contemplating the ashes of his farm, to the man who has been crippled, to the father who has lost his children? Not only did Bismarck go on to talk of the madness of this war, but, strangest of all, he praised Austria and defended her actions. This went against everything he had stood for. The consequences were immediate. Bismarck was against the war. What could this possibly mean? Other deputies were contused, and several of them changed their votes. Eventually, the king and his ministers won out, and war was averted. A few weeks after Bismarck's infamous speech, the king, grateful that he had spoken for peace, made him a cabinet minister. A few years later, he became the Prussian premier. In this role, he eventually led his Bismarck, a man of strong will and deep love for his country, once stood before many and spoke words that surprised everyone. He warned that starting a war without a clear and lasting reason would bring sorrow, asking if they could face a farmer staring at his burned home, or a father mourning his lost children. His quiet plea for peace, even praising an old rival, changed hearts, and in time led to a higher place of trust under his country, and a peace-loving king into a war against Austria, crushing the former empire and establishing a mighty German state with Prussia at its head. Interpretation. At the time of his speech in 1850, Bismarck made several calculations. First, he sensed that the Prussian military, which had not kept pace with other European armies, was unready for war, that Austria, in fact, might very well win, a disastrous result for the future. Second, if the war were lost and Bismarck had supported it, his career would be gravely jeopardized. The king and his conservative ministers wanted peace. Bismarck wanted power. The answer was to throw people off the scent by supporting a cause he detested, saying things he would laugh at if said by another. A whole country was fooled. It was because of Bismarck's speech that the king made him a minister, a position from which he quickly rose to be prime minister, attaining the power to strengthen the Prussian military and accomplish what he had wanted all along the humiliation of Austria and the unification of Germany. A man named Bismarck once stood before his king and country, speaking words he didn't truly mean, all to hide his deeper plans. He knew the army wasn't strong enough to fight Austria yet, and he couldn't risk losing everything if a war went wrong, so he played a careful game, supporting peace while quietly dreaming of power. In time, his clever words won him a high place, letting him build the strength he needed to bring his true vision to life. Under Prussia's leadership, Bismarck was certainly one of the cleverest statesmen who ever lived, a master of strategy and deception. No one suspected what he was up to in this case. Had he announced his real intentions, arguing that it was better to wait now and fight later, he would not have won the argument, since most Prussians wanted war at that moment and mistakenly believed that their army was superior to the Austrians. Had he played up to the king, asking to be made a minister in exchange for supporting peace, he would not have succeeded either. The king would have distrusted his ambition and doubted his sincerity. By being completely slightly insincere and sending misleading signals, however, he deceived everyone, concealed his purpose, and attained everything he wanted. Such is the power of hiding your intentions. Keys to power. Most people are open books. They say what they feel, blurt out their opinions at every opportunity, and constantly reveal their plans and intentions. They do this for several reasons. First, it is easy and natural to always want to talk about one's feelings and plans for the future. It takes effort to control your tongue and monitor what you reveal. Second, many believe that by being honest and open, Bismarck was a very clever leader, one of the smartest who ever lived, with a quiet knack for planning and keeping secrets. No one could guess what he truly wanted, and by hiding his real thoughts, he managed to get everything he aimed for. This shows how powerful it can be to keep your plans close to your heart, letting others see only what you choose to show. They are winning people's hearts and showing their good nature. They are greatly deluded. Honesty is actually a blunt instrument, which bloodies more than it cuts. Your honesty is likely to offend people. It is much more prudent to tailor your words, telling people what they want to hear rather than the coarse and ugly truth of what you feel or think. More important, by being unabashedly open, you make yourself so predictable and familiar that it is almost impossible to respect or fear you, and power will not accrue to a person who cannot inspire such emotions. If you yearn for power, quickly lay honesty aside and train yourself in the art of concealing your intentions. Master the art and you will always have the upper hand. Basic. Honesty, though it seems pure, can often hurt more than help, like a heavy stick that bruises instead of slicing cleanly. When you speak too openly, you might upset others, and it can make you seem too easy to understand, leaving little room for mystery or strength. It's wiser, then, to choose your words with care, keeping your true thoughts hidden, so you hold a quiet power over how others see you. His side. The guards had come to hate the cruel Schwiskis. Once they agreed to Ivan's plan, he struck with the swiftness of a snake, pointing his finger at Schwisky and giving him no time to react. Negotiate with a boyar and you create opportunities for him. A small compromise becomes the toehold he needs to tear you apart. The sudden bold move, without discussion or warning, obliterates these toeholds and builds your authority. You terrify doubters and despisers and gain the confidence of the many who admire and glorify those who act boldly. Observance. In 1514, the 22-year-old Pietro Aretino was working as a lowly assistant scullion to a wealthy Roman family. He had ambitions of greatness as a writer, to inflame the world with his name, but how could a mere lackey hope to realize such dreams? That year, Pope Leo X received from the King of Portugal an embassy that included many gifts, most prominent among them a great elephant, the first in Rome since imperial times. The pontiff adored this elephant and showered it with attention and gifts. But despite his love and care, the elephant, which was called Hanno, became deathly ill. The Pope summoned doctors who administered a 500-pound purgative to the elephant, but all to no avail. The animal died. Young Ivan had a clever plan to deal with the cruel Schwisky family, who many guards had grown to dislike. With a quick and quiet move, like a shadow slipping through the night, he pointed at Schwisky, leaving no room for tricks or delays, and in doing so, he showed everyone his strength and built their trust. It's a gentle reminder that sometimes a firm, sudden step can stop trouble before it grows. The Pope went into mourning. To console himself, he summoned the great painter Raphael and ordered him to create a life-sized painting of Hanno above the animate's tomb, bearing the inscription, "What nature took away, Raphael has with his art restored." Over the next few days, a pamphlet circulated throughout Rome that caused great merriment and laughter. Entitled, "The Last Will and Testament of the Elephant Hanno," it read, in part, "To my heir, the Cardinal Santa Croce, I give my knees, so that he can imitate my genuflections. To my heir, Cardinal Santi Quattro, I give my jaws, so that he can more readily devour all of Christ's revenues. To my heir, Cardinal Medici, I give my ears, so that he can hear everyone's doings. To Cardinal Grassi, who had a reputation for lechery, the elephant bequeathed the appropriate oversized part of his own anatomy. On and on the anonymous pamphlet went, sparing none of the great in Rome, not even the Pope. With each one it took aim at their best-known weakness. The pamphlet ended with, "A beloved animal passed away, and the Pope felt deep sadness in his heart. To ease his sorrow, he asked a talented painter named Raphael to make a big picture of the animal, Hanno, to place above the tomb, with words saying that what nature took, art has brought back." Soon after, a little booklet spread through Rome, quietly poking fun at powerful people, even the Pope, by imagining Hanno giving away parts of himself to match their flaws. Verse, see to it that Aretino is your friend, for he is a bad enemy to have. His words alone could ruin the high pope. So God guard everyone from his tongue. Interpretation. With one short pamphlet, Aretino, son of a poor shoemaker and a servant himself, hurled himself to fame. Everyone in Rome rushed to find out who this daring young man was. Even the Pope, amused by his audacity, sought him out and ended up giving him a job in the papal service. Over the years, he came to be known as the scourge of princes, and his biting tongue earned him the respect and fear of the great, from the King of France to the Habsburg Emperor. Fear, which always magnifies objects, gives a body to all their fancies, which takes for its form whatever they conceive to exist in their enemies' thoughts, so that fearful persons seldom fail to fall into real inconveniences. Aretino, a young man from humble beginnings, wrote words so sharp they could shake even the most powerful people, like a pope or a king. His clever writings made everyone in Rome curious about him, and even the Pope, charmed by his boldness, offered him a place to serve. Over time, his fierce tongue earned him both fear and respect, reminding us how imagined dangers can grow big in our minds and sometimes lead to real troubles occasioned by imaginary dangers, and the Duke, whose predominant character was to be always full of fear and of distrust, was, of all men I have ever seen, the most capable of falling into false steps, by the dread he had of falling into them, being in that like unto hares. The Aretino strategy is simple. When you are as small and obscure as David was, you must find a Goliath to attack. The larger the target, the more attention you gain. The bolder the attack, the more you stand out from the crowd, and the more admiration you earn. Society is full of those who think daring thoughts, but lack the guts to print and publicize them. Voice what the public feels. The expression of shared feelings is always powerful. Search out the most prominent target possible and sling your boldest shot. The world will enjoy the spectacle and will honor the underdog you, that is, with glory and power. A boy playing in the fields got stung by a nettle. He ran home to his mother, telling her that he had but touched that nasty weed and it had stung him. "It was just your touching it, my boy," said the mother, "that caused it to sting you. The next time you meddle with a nettle, grasp it tightly, and it will do you no hurt. Do boldly what you do at all. Most of us are timid. A worried Duke, always afraid of making mistakes, often stumbled into errors just because he feared them so much like a timid hare hiding from danger. There's also a story of a small boy named David, who knew that to be noticed, he must challenge a giant like Goliath, drawing eyes with a brave act. And a young child, stung by a nettle, learns from his mother to hold it firmly next time, for boldness can keep the pain away. We want to avoid tension and conflict, and we want to be liked by all. We may contemplate a bold action, but we rarely bring it to life. We are terrified of the consequences, of what others might think of us, of the hostility we will stir up if we dare go beyond our usual place. Although we may disguise our timidity as a concern for others, a desire not to hurt or offend them, in fact, it is the opposite. We are really self-absorbed, worried about ourselves and how others perceive us. Boldness, on the other hand, is outer-directed and often makes people feel more at ease, since it is less self-conscious and less repressed. This can be seen most clearly in seduction. All great seducers succeed through effrontery. Casanova's boldness was not revealed. Many of us wish to stay safe, to avoid arguments, and to be liked by everyone around us. We might think about doing something brave, but often we hold back, afraid of what could happen or how others might see us if we step out of our quiet spot. True bravery, though, looks outward, helping others feel calm because it isn't wrapped up in worry about itself. In a daring approach to the woman he desired, or in intrepid words to flatter her. It consisted in his ability to surrender himself to her completely and to make her believe he would do anything for her, even risk his life, which in fact he sometimes did. The woman on whom he lavished this attention understood that he held nothing back from her. This was infinitely more flattering than compliments. At no point during the seduction would he show hesitation or doubt, simply because he never felt it, outside of ourselves and the usual doubts that permeate our lives. The moment the seducer hesitates, the charm is broken, because we become aware of the process, of their deliberate effort to seduce us, of their self-consciousness. Boldness directs attention outward and keeps the illusion alive. It never induces awkwardness or embarrassment, and so we admire the bold and prefer to be around them, because their self-confidence infects us and draws us outside our own realm of inwardness and reflection. But with those who have made an impression upon your heart, I have noticed that you are timid. This quality might affect a bourgeoise, but you must attack the heart of a woman of the world with other weapons. A man like Casanova knew how to win a woman's heart, not with loud words or brave actions, but with a quiet, complete giving of himself. He made her feel that he would do anything for her, even face great danger, and this trust was more touching than any sweet words could be. We're drawn to such boldness, for it pulls us away from our own worries and fills us with a gentle strength. Tell you on behalf of women, there is not one of us who does not prefer a little rough handling to too much consideration. Men lose through blundering more hearts than virtue saves. The more timidity a lover shows with us, the more it concerns our pride to goad him on. The more respect he has for our resistance, the more respect we demand of him. We would willingly say to you men, in pity's name, do not suppose us to be so very virtuous. You are forcing us to have too much of it. We are continually struggling to hide the fact that we have permitted ourselves to be loved. Put a woman in a position to say that she has yielded only to a species of violence, or to persuade her that you do not undervalue her, and I will answer for her heart. A little more boldness on your part would put you both at your ease. Do you remember what Monsieur de la Rochefoucauld told you lately? Women, in their quiet hearts, often wish for a touch of strength over too much carefulness from those who love them. If a man hesitates too much, it stirs a need in a woman to push him forward, to see his courage, almost like coaxing a shy friend to join a game. Gently, they might wish for a balance, a little boldness to make everything feel natural and right. A reasonable man in love may act like a madman, but he should not and cannot act like an idiot. Few are born bold. Even Napoleon had to cultivate the habit on the battlefield, where he knew it was a matter of life and death. In social settings, he was awkward and timid, but he overcame this and practiced boldness in every part of his life because he saw its tremendous power, how it could literally enlarge a man, even one who, like Napoleon, was in fact conspicuously small. We also see this change in Ivan the Terrible. A harmless boy suddenly transforms himself into a powerful young man who commands authority, sai empli, by pointing a finger and taking bold action. You must practice and develop your boldness. You will often find uses for it. The best place to begin is often the delicate world of negotiation, particularly those discussions in which you are asked to set your own price. How often we put ourselves down by asking for too little. When Christopher Columbus proposed that the Spanish court finance his voyage to the Americas, he also made the insanely bold demand that he be called Grand Admiral of the Ocean. The court agreed. The price he set was the price he received. A wise thinker once shared that even a sensible person in love might seem wild, though they should never act foolishly. Boldness, much like a skill, isn't always something you're born with, and even great leaders like Napoleon had to learn it step by step, finding courage on the battlefield and slowly bringing it into every corner of life. Like a quiet boy turning into a strong leader with just a firm gesture, you too can grow bold by practicing it, especially in gentle moments like asking for what you truly deserve. Demanded to be treated with respect, and so he was. Henry Kissinger too knew that in negotiation, bold demands work better than starting off with piecemeal concessions and trying to meet the other person halfway. Set your value high, and then, as Count Lustig did, set it higher. Understand, if boldness is not natural, neither is timidity. It is an acquired habit, picked up out of a desire to avoid conflict. If timidity has taken hold of you, then root it out. Your fears of the consequences of a bold action are way out of proportion to reality. And in fact, the consequences of timidity are worse. Your value is lowered, and you create a self-fulfilling cycle of doubt and disaster. Remember, the problems created by an audacious move can be disguised, even remedied by more and greater audacity. Image: the lion and the hare. A wise man once learned that asking for what you truly want with confidence often brings respect and success, just as a shopkeeper might set a high price and still find buyers. Like Henry Kissinger, who knew in talks with others that starting strong, not giving in, little by little, often leads to better results. We can choose to stand tall and value ourselves highly. Let go of quiet fears, for they grow bigger in your mind than they are in truth. And boldness, even if it feels new, can mend any small troubles with even more courage. The lion creates no gaps in his way. His movements are too swift, his jaws too quick and powerful. The timid hare will do anything to escape danger, but in its haste to retreat and flee, it backs into traps, hops smack into its enemy's jaws. Authority. I certainly think that it is better to be impetuous than cautious. For fortune is a woman, and it is necessary, if you wish to master her, to conquer her by force. And it can be seen that she lets herself be overcome by the bold, rather than by those who proceed coldly. And therefore, like a woman, she is always a friend to the young because they are less cautious, fiercer, and master her with greater audacity. Niccolo Machiavelli, boldness should never be the strategy behind all of your actions. It is a tactical instrument to be used at the right moment. Plan and think ahead, and make the final element the bold move that will bring you success. In other words, since boldness is a learned response, it is also one that you learn to control and utilize at will. To go through life armed only with audacity would be tiring and also fatal. You would offend too many people. A lion moves with such speed and strength that nothing stands in its way, never hesitating as it hunts. On the other hand, a shy hare, always running from danger, often stumbles into traps or straight into the jaws of its foe. Boldness, when used at the right time, can be a powerful tool, but it must be guided by careful thought and planning, like choosing the perfect moment to leap forward in a quiet game, as is proven by those who cannot control their boldness. One such person was Lola Montez. Her audacity brought her triumphs and led to her seduction of the King of Bavaria. But since she could never rein in her boldness, it also led to her downfall in Bavaria, in England, wherever she turned. It crossed the border between boldness and the appearance of cruelty, even insanity. Ivan the Terrible suffered the same fate. When the power of boldness brought him success, he stuck to it, to the point where it became a lifelong pattern of violence and sadism. He lost the ability to tell when boldness was appropriate and when it was not. Timidity has no place in the realm of power. You will often benefit, however, by being able to feign it. At that point, of course, it is no longer timidity, but an offensive weapon. You are luring people in with your show of shyness, all the better to pounce on them boldly later. The ending is everything. Plan all the way to it, taking into account all the Lola Montez, a woman of great daring, won many victories with her fearless ways, even capturing the heart of a king in Bavaria. Yet, her inability to hold back that boldness turned her path dark, leading to trouble and sadness wherever she went, as her actions seemed harsh and wild to others. Like her, some who chase power forget when to be gentle, and so their strength becomes their fall, while a quiet show of shyness can sometimes be a wiser tool to draw others near. Possible consequences, obstacles, and twists of fortune that might reverse your hard work and give the glory to others. By planning to the end, you will not be overwhelmed by circumstances, and you will know when to stop. Gently guide fortune and help determine the future by thinking far ahead. In 1510, a ship set out from the island of Hispaniola, now Haiti, and the Dominican Republic for Venezuela, where it was to rescue a besieged Spanish colony. Several miles out of port, a stowaway climbed out of a provision chest Vasco Núñez de Balboa, a noble Spaniard who had come to the New World in search of gold, but had fallen into debt and had escaped his creditors by hiding in the chest. There are very few men, and they are the exceptions, who are able to think and feel beyond the present moment. Balboa had been obsessed with gold ever since Columbus had returned to Spain from his voyages with tales of a fabulous but as yet undiscovered kingdom called El Dorado. Balboa was one of the first adventurers to come in search of Columbus's land of gold. Vasco Núñez de Balboa, a brave man from long ago, hid inside a chest on a ship leaving an island, hoping to find gold in a faraway land. He had heard stories of a hidden kingdom full of riches, and even though he owed money to others, his heart was set on this dream. Let's rest now, thinking of his quiet hope as he sailed toward the unknown. And he had decided from the beginning that he would be the one to find it through sheer audacity and single-mindedness. Now that he was free of his creditors, nothing would stop him. Unfortunately, the ship's owner, a wealthy jurist named Francisco Fernandez de Enciso, was furious when told of the stowaway, and he ordered that Balboa be left on the first island they came across. Before they found any island, however, Enciso received news that the colony he was to rescue had been abandoned. This was Balboa's chance. He told the sailors of his previous voyages to Panama and of the rumors he had heard of gold in the area. The excited sailors convinced Enciso to spare Balboa's life and to establish a colony in Panama. Weeks later, they named their new settlement Darien. Darien's first governor was Enciso, but Balboa was not a man. Balboa, a brave explorer, dreamed of finding a land full of gold, a place once spoken of by Columbus, and he believed with all his heart that he would be the one to discover it through bold courage and a steady mind. When he sneaked onto a ship owned by a rich man named Enciso, trouble brewed as Enciso grew angry and wanted to leave Balboa on a lonely island. But soon news came that their planned destination was empty, giving Balboa a quiet moment to share stories of Panama and whispers of gold hidden there. The sailors, touched by his words, asked Enciso to let Balboa stay, and together they built a new home called Darien, where new hopes began to grow. To let others steal the initiative, he campaigned against Enciso among the sailors, who eventually made it clear that they preferred him as governor. Enciso fled to Spain, fearing for his life. Months later, when a representative of the Spanish crown arrived to establish himself As the new official governor of Darien, he was turned away. On his return voyage to Spain, this man drowned. The drowning was accidental, but under Spanish law, Balboa had murdered the governor and usurped his position. Balboa's bravado had got him out of scrapes before, but now his hopes of wealth and glory seemed doomed. To lay claim to El Dorado, should he discover it, he would need the approval of the Spanish king, which as an outlaw he would never receive. There was only one solution. Panamanian Indians had told Balboa of a vast ocean on the other side of the Central American isthmus, and had said that by traveling south upon this western coast, he would reach a fabulous land of gold, called by a name that to his ears sounded like Biru. Balboa decided he would cross the treacherous jungles of Panama and become the first European to bathe his feet in this new ocean. From there, he would march on El Dorado. If he did this on Spain's behalf, he would obtain. Balboa, a bold man in a faraway land, worked to win the trust of the sailors around him, pushing aside a leader named Enciso, who then ran back to Spain in fear. When another man came from the Spanish king to take charge, he was sent away, and though his drowning on the way home was an accident, the law blamed Balboa as if he had done wrong. Now, with whispers of a great ocean and a golden land called Biru beyond the dangerous jungles, Balboa chose to journey through the wild to see this new water with his own eyes, hoping for a path to riches and honor. In the eternal gratitude of the king, and would secure his own reprieve, only he had to act before Spanish authorities came to arrest him. Two frogs dwelt in the same pool. The pool being dried up under the summer's heat, they left it and set out together to seek another home. As they went along, they chanced to pass a deep well, amply supplied with water. On seeing which, one of the frogs said to the other, "Let us descend and make our abode in this well. It will furnish us with shelter and food." The other replied with greater caution, "But suppose the water should fail us? How can we get out again from so great a depth? Do nothing without a regard to the consequences." In 1513, then, Balboa set out with 190 soldiers. Halfway across the isthmus, some 90 miles wide at that point, only 60 soldiers remained, many having succumbed to the harsh conditions, the blood-sucking insects, the torrential rainfall, fever. Finally, from a mountaintop, Balboa became the first European to lay eyes on the Pacific Ocean. A man named Balboa faced a heavy choice long ago. He needed to act quickly to win the trust of a king and save himself from trouble, much like two frogs who had to leave their dried-up pool to find a new home, carefully thinking about whether a deep well would be safe. Balboa journeyed with many soldiers through tough lands, losing friends to sickness and rain, until he stood on a mountain and saw a vast, quiet ocean stretching far beyond. Days later, he marched in his armor into its waters, bearing the banner of Castile and claiming all its seas, lands, and islands in the name of the Spanish throne. Look to the end, no matter what it is you are considering. Often enough, God gives a man a glimpse of happiness and then utterly ruins him. Indians from the area greeted Balboa with gold, jewels, and precious pearls, the like of which he had never seen. When he asked where these had come from, the Indians pointed south to the land of the Incas. But Balboa had only a few soldiers left. For the moment, he decided he should return to Darien, send the jewels and gold to Spain as a token of goodwill, and ask for a large army to aid him in the conquest of El Dorado. When news reached Spain of Balboa's bold crossing of the isthmus, his discovery of the Western Ocean, and his planned conquest of El Dorado, the former criminal became a hero. He was instantly proclaimed governor of the new land. But before the king, Balboa, a brave explorer, walked into the ocean waters wearing his armor, holding the flag of Castile, and claimed all the nearby seas, lands, and islands for Spain. The local people welcomed him with gifts of gold, jewels, and pearls, treasures he had never seen before, and they quietly pointed south to a faraway place full of riches, Though his heart longed to go further, with only a few tired men by his side, he chose to return home, send the treasures to Spain, and wait patiently for more help to continue his journey. The king and queen received word of his discovery. They had already sent a dozen ships under the command of a man named Pedro Arias Davila, Pedrarias, with orders to arrest Balboa for murder and to take command of the colony. By the time Pedrarias arrived in Panama, he had learned that Balboa had been pardoned and that he was to share the governorship with the former outlaw. All the same, Balboa felt uneasy. Gold was his dream. El Dorado, his only desire. In pursuit of this goal, he had nearly died many times over, and to share the wealth and glory with a newcomer would be intolerable. He also soon discovered that Pedrarias was a jealous, bitter man, and equally unhappy with the situation. Once again, the only solution for Balboa was to seize the initiative by proposing to cross the jungle with a larger army, carrying shipbuilding materials and tools. Once on the Pacific coast, he would create an armada with which to conquer the Incas. Surprisingly enough, Pedrarias agreed to the plan, perhaps sensing it would never work. Hundreds died in this second march through the jungle, and the timber they carried rotted in the torrential rains. Balboa, as usual, was undaunted. No power in the world could thwart his plan, and on arriving at the Pacific, a long time ago, a man named Balboa had found something amazing, but trouble was already on its way. The king and queen had sent ships with a man called Pedrarias to take over and arrest Balboa, though they later learned he was forgiven and had to share power. Still, Balboa felt worried, dreaming only of gold and not wanting to split his treasure with this jealous newcomer, so he planned a big journey across the jungle to build ships and win more riches, even as hardships followed. Just rest now, let the story fade as you drift. He began to cut down trees for new lumber, but the men remaining to him were too few and too weak to mount an invasion, and once again Balboa had to return to Darien. Pedrarias had in any case invited Balboa back to discuss a new plan, and on the outskirts of the settlement the explorer was met by Francisco Pizarro, an old friend who had accompanied him on his first crossing of the isthmus. But this was a trap. Leading 100 soldiers, Pizarro surrounded his former friend, arrested him, and returned him to Pedrarias, who tried him on charges of rebellion. A few days later, Balboa's head fell into a basket, along with those of his most trusted followers. Years later, Pizarro himself reached Peru, and Balboa's deeds were forgotten. In ancient times, a king of Tartary was out walking with some of his noblemen. At the roadside was an Abdal, a wandering Sufi, who cried out, "Whoever will give me 100 dinars, I will give him some good advice." The king stopped and said, "Abdal, what is this good advice for 100 dinars?" "Sir," answered the Abdal, "order the sum to be given to me, and I will tell it you immediately." Balboa worked hard, cutting down trees for wood, but his small, tired group of men couldn't push forward with any big plans, so he turned back to Darien. There, an old friend named Pizarro met him, only to betray him with soldiers, leading to a sad end for Balboa and his closest companions. Meanwhile, in a quiet old story, a king paused by the road to hear advice from a wandering wise man, paying a heavy price for words he hoped would be worth it. The king did so, expecting to hear something extraordinary. The dervish said to him, "My advice is this: never begin anything until you have reflected what will be the end of it." At this, the nobles and everyone else present laughed, saying that the Abdal had been wise to ask for his money in advance. But the king said, "You have no reason to laugh at the good advice this Abdal has given me. No one is unaware of the fact that we should think well before doing anything, but we are daily guilty of not remembering, and the consequences are evil." I very much value this dervish's advice. The king decided to bear the advice always in his mind, and commanded it to be written in gold on the walls and even engraved on his silver plate. Not long afterward, a plotter desired to kill the king. He bribed the royal surgeon with a promise of the prime ministership if he thrust a poisoned lancet into the king's arm. When the time came to let some of the king's blood, a silver basin was placed to catch the blood. Suddenly, the surgeon, a wise dervish, once told a king to always think about the end before starting anything, a piece of gentle wisdom shared in a quiet moment. Though others around laughed, the king took these words to heart, choosing to keep them close, even having them written in gold on his walls and carved into his silver plates. His mind held this advice like a soft whisper, guiding him to pause and reflect before any step. Became aware of the words engraved upon it, never begin anything until you have reflected what will be the end of it. It was only then that he realized that if the plotter became king, he could have the surgeon killed instantly and would not need to fulfill his bargain. The king, seeing that the surgeon was now trembling, asked him what was wrong with Hun, and so he confessed the truth at that very moment. The plotter was seized, and the king sent for all the people who had been present when the Abdal gave his advice and said to them, "Do you still laugh at the dervish?" Interpretation: most men are ruled by the heart, not the head. Their plans are vague, and when they meet obstacles, they improvise. But improvisation will only bring you as far as the next crisis, and is never a substitute for thinking several steps ahead and planning to the end. Balboa had a dream of glory and wealth, and a wise king once read a message carved in stone telling him to always think about the end before starting anything. He understood that trusting someone with bad intentions could lead to betrayal, like a friend promising to share a treasure but keeping it all in the end. Quietly, he faced the truth and learned to plan carefully, step by step, to avoid such pain. Plan to reach it, yet his bold deeds and his discovery of the Pacific are largely forgotten, for he committed what in the world of power is the ultimate sin. He went part way, leaving the door open for others to take over. A real man of power would have had the prudence to see the dangers in the distance, the rivals who would want to share in the conquests, the vultures that would hover once they heard the word gold. Balboa should have kept his knowledge of the Incas secret until after he'd conquered Peru. Only then would his wealth and his head have been secure. Once Pedrarius arrived on the scene, a man of power and prudence would have schemed to kill or imprison him, and to take over the army he had brought for the conquest of Peru. But Balboa was locked in the moment, always reacting emotionally, never thinking ahead. What good is it to have the greatest dream in the world if others reap the benefits and the glory? Never lose your head over a vague, open-ended dreaming plan to the end. In 1863, the Prussian premier Otto von Bismarck surveyed the chessboard of European power as it then stood. The main players were England, France, and Austria. Prussia itself was one of several states in the loosely allied German Federation. Austria, dominant member of the Federation. Balboa, a brave explorer who found the Pacific Ocean, made a quiet mistake by not thinking far ahead. He shared his discoveries too soon, letting others step in to claim the treasures and lands he dreamed of, instead of keeping his plans close until everything was safe. It's a gentle reminder to always look to the end of your path, making sure your dreams are protected before others can take them away. Made sure that the other German states remained weak, divided, and submissive. Bismarck believed that Prussia was destined for something far greater than servant boy to Austria. This is how Bismarck played the game. His first move was to start a war with lowly Denmark in order to recover the former Prussian lands of Schleswig-Holstein. He knew that these rumblings of Prussian independence might worry France and England, so he enlisted Austria in the war, claiming that he was recovering Schleswig-Holstein for their benefit. In a few months after the war was decided, Bismarck demanded that the newly conquered lands be made part of Prussia. The Austrians, of course, were furious, but they compromised. First, they agreed to give the Prussians Schleswig, and a year later they sold them Holstein. The world began to see that Austria was weakening and that Prussia was on the rise. Bismarck's next move was his boldest. In 1866, he convinced King William of Prussia to withdraw from the German Federation, and in doing so to go to war with Austria itself. King William's wife, his son the Crown Prince, and the princes of the other German kingdoms vehemently opposed such a war. But Bismarck, undaunted, succeeded in forcing the conflict. Bismarck, a clever leader in Prussia, wanted his land to grow strong and important, not just follow Austria's shadow. He started by bringing Austria into a small war with Denmark, saying it was for their good, to win back old Prussian lands. Soon, though, he kept those lands for Prussia. And even though Austria was upset, they gave in bit by bit, while the world watched Prussia rise quietly. And Prussia's superior army defeated the Austrians in the brutally short 7 weeks' war. The king and the Prussian generals then wanted to march on Vienna, taking as much land from Austria as possible. But Bismarck stopped them. Now he presented himself as on the side of peace. The result was that he was able to conclude a treaty with Austria that granted Prussia and the other German states total autonomy. Bismarck could now position Prussia as the dominant power in Germany and the head of a newly formed North German Confederation. The French and the English began to compare Bismarck to Attila the Hun and to fear that he had designs on all of Europe. Once he had started on the path to conquest, there was no telling where he would stop, and indeed 3 years later Bismarck provoked a war with France. First he appeared to give his permission to France's annexation of Belgium. Then at the last moment he changed his mind. Playing a cat-and-mouse game, he infuriated the French Emperor Napoleon III and stirred up his own king against the French. To no one's surprise, war broke out in 1870. Bismarck, a clever leader in Prussia, wanted his land to grow strong and important, not just follow Austria's shadow. He started by taking small steps, like joining with Austria to win back some old Prussian lands from Denmark, though he kept most of the gains for Prussia, which made Austria angry but unable to fight back. Slowly, with patience, he built Prussia's power, even daring to challenge Austria in a quick war, and later France, always planning his moves like a quiet game of chess in the night. That was the 48 Laws of Power by Unknown. Subscribe to our channel for more stories like this.